The board will now come to order. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus, Alderwoman Flowers, Alderman Bosley, Alderman Moore, Alderwoman Hubbard, Alderwoman Ingracia, Alderman Conway, Alderman Ortman, Alderman Vollmer, Alderman Villa, Alderman Arnowitz, here. Alderwoman Murphy, Alderwoman Howard, present. Alderwoman Green, Alderwoman Behringer, present. Alderman Rhodey, Alderman Kennedy, Alderwoman Davis, Alderman Schmid, Alderman French, Alderman Boyd, Alderman Vaccaro, Alderman Ogilvie, Alderman Cone, present. Alderman Williamson, here. Alderman Carter, Alderwoman Cruzen, President Reed,
here.
Alderwoman Tyus, Alderwoman Flowers, Alderman Bosley, Alderman Moore,
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Alderman Ortman, Alderman Villa, Alderman Rhodey, Alderman Kennedy, Alderwoman Davis, Alderman Carter, 22 present.
Quorum being present, we will be led today in prayer by the Reverend J.J. Shields from Mount Beulah Missionary Baptist Church, and he also has with him the First Lady, Joyce Shields. And we just celebrated her birthday. Could you stand and let's give you a round of applause for your birthday? Reverend Shields.
Shall we pray? O God of all creations, O God of wisdom and truth, as this Board of Aldermen gathered together today to deliberate and to debate on matters so important to the city, present and future, we thank you, O God, for the privilege to enjoy the creation, the breath of life, health, strength, and well-being with the capacity to serve. Oh, Heavenly Father, we come today asking for your guidance, wisdom, and support on this meeting. We pray that all will engage in meaningful and productive discussions. We ask that you will guide and direct this meeting, that all will act in accordance with what is best for this community and this city. Fill each with grace, Lord God, as they make decisions that will affect every baby, every child, every teenager, every father, every mother, every grandparent, the employed, the unemployed, the underemployed, the homeowner, the homeless that walk the street, every constituent of each ward. We pray that thou will go with us. We pray that whether the conversations or acrimonious, or the debates or deliberation is disputatious in dialogue. And oh God, we pray that at the end of the day, there will be equality, fairness, and justice served by the people in power for those people of less power. Oh God, continue to remind us that out of all that is done here today, all that is accomplished here today, is for the greater good and the glory and the service of mankind. Forever remind us it is not about us, it is not about self, but a greater and a larger picture, O God, and the vision that matches and agree with yours. We thank you for your hand of blessing on this meeting. O God, give each what it takes to build a new generation a generation with a solid foundation of hope, a generation with new thoughts, fresh ideas, irreplaceable words, different attitudes and action that will propel them into a new direction to build and to rebuild the fabric of each ward in this city. Oh, God, bless the work done in these chambers today, that it will shape and mold the future of all of our children, children, and children of the children to come, and that the downtrodden, the less fortunate, eyes will be open to realize that on the other side of nothing, God, there is something awesome awaiting them. We pray because of this meeting, the hurting, the hollow of heart, the disgruntled, oh God, the disenfranchised, their journey and destiny for a better today and tomorrow shall meet. Now, Almighty One, thank you for this President Reed. Let your words of blessing blow in his direction. Write on his heart your vision for this city through his leadership and humble spirit and experience. As you breathe on him, we know as a partnership with your Holy Spirit, he is able to take the city to the next level. Oh Jehovah, we pause with a special prayer of urgency now for President Reed's father. As he goes through the valleys of sickness and infirmity, we pray your mighty hands of healing, strength, and complete health and wellness in your will. Your words say that you're Jehovah Rapha, one that heals all diseases. We pause and thank you who you are and what you're going to do. We even thank you for the president who is still able to come and conduct business with wisdom, clarity of mind, and fairness for the city, even in his time like these. Thank you for this board praying and standing by his side in such a time. Forever, Almighty God, strengthen his family where there is peace. Now, Almighty God, of wisdom and truth, may this chamber, may this board be a beacon of light where there is no light. May it be hope where there is no hope, peace where there is chaos, and in each ward around the city. May your light enfold us, may your spirit guide us, and may your grace abound with us. Father of all creation, wisdom, and truth, Father of justice and peace. In your name I pray this prayer. In your name I pray this prayer. In Jesus' name, amen, and amen, and amen.
That was a good prayer, Reverend. The board has also created a resolution for Joyce in honor of her 60th, it's hard to believe, birthday, but congratulations and thank you so much for your family and what you guys have done for our entire region. I know that you have a tight schedule this morning, so we're not gonna hold you, but I really want to just make sure you had that and understand that we thank you for everything that your family have continued to do for our entire region.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Introduction of honored guests. Any introduction of honored guests? Alderman from the 14th?
like to have for my honored guests today Gary Otten from Painters District Council 2, Jeff Hans from the Carpenters Union, Demetrius Alfred for Firefighters Local 73, whose union hall is housed in the shadow of the beautiful Bevo Mill. Also, I would like to have for my very, very special guests Mr. Neil Bruntrager and Tom Walsh from the Police Officers Association.
Alderman from the 13th.
President, members of the board, I would like to have as my special guests this morning Rachel Smith and Mary Pat Bettinger from the Circuit Attorney's Office.
All right. Alderman from the 8th.
Of the board, I'd like to have as my guests this morning two residents of the 8th Ward, Jim and Diana Leskovich, that are sitting at my desk. Thank you.
Alderman from 26.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I'd like to have as my honored guest today Mr. Brian Williams, who works with the Congressman Clay's office. Also, we have Reverend John Watson. He is the chairman of the Sherman Park Academy Association and also a resident of the 26th Ward. And she's a board member of the Sherman Park Academy Association, which is Gwendolyn Cogshell. Thank you.
Alderman from the 9th.
President, members of the board, I'd like to have for my honor guest today Maureen McDonald, St. Louis Association of Realtors, and she's over in this corner now. Couldn't find her where she normally is. And Dan Gunther, a constituent from Benton Park.
Alderman from the 5th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the board, I'd like to have as my honored guest Otis Williams from St. Louis Development Corporation.
Alderman from the 3rd.
Mr. President, members of the board, I'd like to have Linda Primer as my special guest today.
Oh, welcome, Linda. Alderwoman from the 15th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. As my special guest today, I'd like to have David Holmes from the St. Louis Labor Club, Mike Grady from Plumbers and Pipe Fitters Local 562, and with him today are two Coro Fellows following in my footsteps, Marina Valeria and Sarah Rahim, and then also Chelsea Merta, who is around here somewhere. Thank you.
Alderwoman from the 1st.
Mr. President, members of the board, I'd like to have as my special guest Mrs. Charzella Taylor, who is a resident in the parcel of land that we are going to put eminent domain on today and take her family home of 60 years away from her.
Alderman from the 9th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to also have for my honored guest Ryan Lynch from the St. Louis Police Officers Association and every other police officer that's here today.
Alderman from the 11th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning. Mr. President, I would like to introduce Miss Ollie Stewart and a group of seniors from the Southside Wellness Center as my guests this morning.
Alderwoman from the 16th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the board, I would like to have as my special guest today Mr. Anthony Lancia with the AGC.
Alderman from the 22nd.
Good morning, Mr. President, members of the board. I'd like to have as my special guest Mr. Chris Pickle and Leroy Grant with AT&T.
Alderman from 26.
Good morning, Mr. President. Again, I'll be remiss to forget a good friend of mine and an excellent gentleman who has led the city of St. Louis on a lot of fights. He's been an excellent man. He is the former comptroller, Burris Jones, and a resident of 26th Ward. Thank you.
We also are so honored to have with us today the cancer support community, Renata Sledge, is that correct? And F. Scott Gee. Please raise your hand so we know. Let's give them a round of applause for all their work. Alderman from the 18th.
Yes, Mr. President. Members of the board, I'd like to welcome as our special guest today Mr. Marla Rogers.
Oh, yeah. Any further introductions? Alderman from the 10th, like to wrap us up.
Pardon me, we have a traffic jam over here. I called Mike Halsey. He's going to be putting a stop sign up right behind my desk. Mr. President, members of the board, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to be here as we get into the weekend to celebrate not only Mardi Gras, Valentine's Day, and naturally this would have to be Friday the 13th, but what I actually do have is a guest for once. It was on this day in 1880 that Thomas Edison discovered the Edison effect. We are fortunate to have with us a gentleman who was looking over his shoulder and said, "Hey, Tom, turn the light on." Mr. Fred Steffen himself.
Approval of the minutes. Alderman from the 18th, you recognize on approval of the minutes.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the board, I move for the approval of the minutes of January 30th.
It's moved by the Alderman from the 18th, seconded by the Alderman from the 20th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Report of city officials.
Report of city officials can be found in sections A, B, and C of the agenda and have been placed in all aldermen's mailboxes. I have from His Honor the Mayor the following correspondence. Dear members of the board, I have the pleasure to submit the following individuals for appointment to the Grove Community Improvement District Board of Directors. The appointment of Fran Frenera, a property owner whose term will expire on June the 30th, 2018. The appointment of Brian Pratt, a property owner whose term will expire on June the 30th, 2018. The reappointment of Kelly Kenter, a business owner whose term will expire on June the 30th, 2018. The reappointment of Jack Bumstark, a property owner whose term will expire on June the 30th, 2018. The reappointment of Austin Barzanti, a property owner whose term will expire on June the 30th, 2018. The reappointment of Chip Schloss, a property owner whose term will expire on June the 30th, 2018. On behalf of the Grove Community Improvement District Board of Directors, I respectfully request your approval of these appointments. Sincerely, Francis G. Slay, Mayor, City of St. Louis.
Alderman from the 17th, you recognize on the mayor's appointment to the Grove Community Improvement District Board of Directors.
Yes, Mr. President, I move that we approve the appointments of the mayor to the Grove Improvement District.
Moved by the Alderman from the 17th. Entertain a second on that motion. Seconded by the Alderman from the 25th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Dear members of the board, I have the pleasure to submit the following individual for appointment to the Airport Arts Advisory Committee. The appointment of Mr. Leslie Markle, a resident of the 8th Ward, whose term will expire on December the 10th, 2019. I respectfully request your approval of this appointment. Sincerely, Francis G. Slay, Mayor, City of St. Louis.
Alderman from 28th, you recognize on the mayor's appointment to the Airport Arts Advisory Committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the appointment to confirm the mayor's appointments to the Airport Advisory Committee.
Moved by the Alderman from the 28th, seconded by the Alderman from the 20th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Dear members of the board, I have the pleasure to submit the following individual for appointment to the Missouri History Museum Sub-District. The appointment of Jeremy Colbert, a resident of the 26th Ward, whose term will expire on September the 30th, 2016. I respectfully request your approval of this appointment. Sincerely, Francis G. Slay, Mayor, City of St. Louis.
Alderman from 28th, you recognize on the mayor's appointment to the Missouri History Museum Sub-District.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to confirm the mayor's appointment to the Missouri History Museum Sub-District Board.
Moved by the Alderman from the 28th, seconded by the Alderman from the 6th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Dear members of the board, I have the pleasure to submit the following individual for appointment to the local Central Business District. The appointment of James L. Edwards, Jr., a resident of the 19th Ward, whose term will expire on December the 31st, 2018. On behalf of the local Central Business District, I respectfully request your approval of this appointment. Sincerely, Francis G. Slay, Mayor, City of St. Louis.
Alderman from the 6th, you recognize on the mayor's appointment to the Locust Central Business District.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the board, I move for appointment to the Locust Business District.
Moved by the Alderman from the 6th, seconded by the Alderman from the 25th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Dear members of the board, I have the pleasure to submit the following individuals for reappointment to the Board of Adjustment. The reappointment of Sally Burke, who resides at 6828 Scanlon, and whose term will expire on December the 18th, 2015. The reappointment of John Albert, who resides at 2744 Bird, and whose term will expire on December the 18th, 2015. The reappointment of John Caruso, who resides at 5535 Columbia, whose term will expire on December the 18th, 2015. I respectfully request your approval of these appointments. Sincerely, Francis G. Slay, Mayor, City of St. Louis.
Alderman from the 17th, you recognize on the mayor's appointment to the Board of Adjustments.
Yes, Mr. President, I move that we approve the mayor's appointments to the Board of Adjustment.
Moved by the Alderman from the 17th, seconded by the Alderman from the 16th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Dear members of the board, I have the pleasure to submit the following individuals for appointments to the North Broadway Cary Community Improvement District. The appointment of Alexander Keeling, a resident of St. Louis County. The appointment of Carl Keeling, a resident of St. Louis County. The appointment of Mary Keeling, a resident of St. Louis County. The appointment of Laura Keeling, a resident of St. Louis County. The appointment of Kyle Keeling, a resident of St. Louis County. All of these terms expire on June the 20th, 2017. On behalf of the North Broadway Cary Community Improvement District, I respectfully request your approval of these appointments. Sincerely, Francis G. Slay, Mayor, City of St. Louis.
Alderman from the 2nd, you recognize on the mayor's appointment to the North Broadway Cary Community Improvement District.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I move for the approval of the appointments of the North Broadway Cary Community Improvement District.
Moved by the Alderman from the 2nd, seconded by the Alderman from the 14th. Any discussion? Alderwoman from the 1st.
President, members of the board, if the Alderwoman from the 2nd would yield, please. I've got a few questions.
Alderwoman from the 2nd, will you yield for question to the Alderwoman?
No.
Alderwoman from the 1st, Alderwoman from the 2nd has denied your...
Roll call.
There's been a request for roll.
Since I'm not going to get my questions answered, then I'll make my statements, okay? They were very benign questions. We had some questions about all of...
Please proceed.
I thought someone asked for point of order.
There was I didn't hear a point of order.
Okay.
No, she's just saying that she's asking for a roll call, but we're still in the discussion phase. We're still in the discussion phase. I have not started the roll call yet. Please proceed.
My questions were going to be, I have never seen an improvement district or any other thing where the whole family or all family members seem to be from one family that are on something. So that was just interesting to me. I wanted to just ask about that. And my second question, which someone said to me, and I don't like to hear secondhand, so I wanted to hear, is that all these people are from out of town, and what kind of community improvement district do we have where everybody's from out of town and they're all from the same family? Those were going to be my questions. And at this point, I do ask for a roll call.
Okay. Any further discussion? Alderman from the 2nd, would you like to close?
I renew my motion.
It's been moved and seconded that we affirm the aforementioned members to the North Broadway Cary Community Improvement District. There's been a request for roll call. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus, Alderwoman Flowers, Alderman Bosley, Alderman Moore, Alderwoman Hubbard, Alderwoman Ingracia, Alderman Conway, Alderman Ortman, Alderman Vollmer, Alderman Villa, Alderman Arnowitz, Alderwoman Murphy, Alderwoman Howard, Alderwoman Green, Alderwoman Behringer, Alderman Rhodey, Alderman Kennedy, Alderwoman Davis, Alderman Schmid, Alderman French, Alderman Boyd, Alderman Vaccaro, Alderman Ogilvie, Alderman Cone, Alderman Williamson. Alderman Carter. Alderwoman Cruzen. President Reed.
Aye.
Alderman Vollmer. Alderwoman Davis. Alderman Vaccaro. 26 aye votes, 1 no vote.
By your vote, you sustain the motion. Alderman from the second and the aforementioned members to the North Broadway Cary Community Improvement District.
That's the extent of report of city officials.
We'll dispense with line item 7. Would anyone like to take any bills off of any of our informal calendars? Would anyone like to take any bills off of any of our informal calendars? We would dispense with line items 8 through 12, second reading.
Following board bill was reported out of the Public Safety Committee, Board Bill 208, Committee Substitute, sponsored by Aldermen and Alderwomen, French, Kennedy, President Reed, Davis, Williamson, Carter, Hubbard, Moore, Bosley, Flowers, Young, Ingracia, Mayor Slay, Cruzen, Conway, Green, and Cone, an ordinance establishing a civilian oversight board and containing a severability clause. Following board bill was reported out of the Ways and Means Committee, Board Bill 219, sponsored by Alderman Rhodey, an ordinance authorizing and directing the mayor and the comptroller to execute a quitclaim deed to Jaruba Corporation for a certain city-owned property located in City Block 5114, property known as 4213 Gibson, upon receipt of and in consideration a sum of $375,000 and containing an emergency clause. That's the extent of our second reading.
Alderman from the 21st, you recognize.
The rules and move Board Bill 208, Committee Substitute, to the Perfection Calendar.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 21st. Entertain a second on that motion. Seconded by the Alderman from the second. There's been a request for roll call, which is the case since we are suspending the rules. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Flowers. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderman Conway. Alderman Ortman. No. Alderman Vollmer. No. Alderman Villa. No. Alderman Arnowitz. No. Alderwoman Murphy. No. Alderwoman Howard. No. Alderwoman Green. Alderwoman Behringer. No. Alderman Rhodey. Alderman Kennedy. Alderwoman Davis. Alderman Schmid. Alderman French. Alderman Boyd. Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Ogilvie. Alderman Cone. Alderman Williamson. Alderman Carter. Alderwoman Cruzen. I didn't hear you. President Reed.
Aye.
Alderwoman Davis. Mm-hmm. 15 aye votes, 12 no votes.
By your vote, you fail to sustain the motion, Alderman from the 21st. We'll dispense with line item 14, perfection consent.
Board Bill 268, sponsored by Alderwoman Cruzen, an ordinance adopting and approving the petition to amend the petition to establish the Central West End Business Community Improvement District to add property to the Central West End Business Community Improvement District and containing a severability clause. Board Bill 235, sponsored by Alderwoman Ingracia and President Reed, an ordinance repealing the requirement of approval of the City Plan Commission of all applications for proposed residential structures or uses that are to be governmentally subsidized, repealing Section 1 of Ordinance 56167 and containing an emergency clause. Board Bill 242, sponsored by Alderman Conway, and an ordinance recommended by the Planning Commission to change the zoning of property from B, two-family dwelling, and H, area commercial to the H area commercial district only for property at 2700 South Grand and containing an emergency clause. Board Bill 260, sponsored by Alderwoman Ingracia, President Reed, and Alderwoman Davis, an ordinance amending the definitions under the Civil Rights Enforcement Agency, repealing Section 2 of Ordinance 67119 and enacting new section in lieu thereof to include the definition source of income and containing an emergency clause. Board Bill 269, sponsored by Alderwoman Ingracia, and ordinance affirming adoption of a redevelopment plan, redevelopment area, redevelopment project, authorizing the execution of a redevelopment agreement between the city and ROL Capital and containing a severability clause. Board Bill 270, sponsored by Alderwoman Ingracia, and ordinance designating a portion of the city as a redevelopment area known as the Union Station Phase 2 redevelopment area pursuant to the Real Property Tax Increment Allocation Redevelopment Act, establishing the Union Station Phase 2 Special Allocation Fund and containing a severability clause. Board Bill 271, sponsored by Alderwoman Ingracia, and ordinance recommended by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, authorizing and directing the issuance and delivery of not to exceed $18,500,000 plus issuance cost principal amount of tax increment revenue notes for Union Station Phase 2 redevelopment project containing a severability clause. Board Bill 238, committee substitute, sponsored by Alderman Williamson, and ordinance to regulate employer and employee working relationships between the city and all employees under the classified service, including compensation plan, terms and conditions of employment, benefits, leaves of absence, and authorization for a deferred compensation plan, repealing ordinance 69189 and 69617, allocating certain other employees to a grade with rates and including an emergency clause. That's the extent of perfection consent.
Alderman from the 18th, you recognize on the motion for the perfection consent calendar. Alderman from the 18th. Alderman from the 18th. Alderman from the 18th, you recognize on the motion for the perfection consent calendar.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the board, I move for adoption of the perfection consent calendar.
Moved by the Alderman from the 18th. Entertain a second on that motion. Seconded by the Alderman from 26. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Board bills for perfection.
Board Bill 232, sponsored by Alderwoman Davis, and ordinance recommended by the Airport Commission, the Board of Public Service, and the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, authorizing and directing the Director of Airports and the Comptroller to enter into and execute an agreement and a contract of sale between St. Louis and North Park Partners for the sum of $150,000, containing a severability clause and an emergency clause.
Alderwoman from the 19th, you recognize on the professional board bill number 232.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the board. I move for adoption of approval of Board Bill 232.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 19th, seconded by the Alderman from the 6th. Alderman from the 19th, please proceed.
I'm just going to give a brief description again. This is a board bill authorizing the airport to sell a parcel of property to North Park Partners, and it has been a very fluid agreement with the Berkeley community, including the mayor and others. And so I renew my motion.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? It's been moved by the Alderman from the 19th, seconded by the Alderman from the 6th, that we perfect Board Bill 232. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. That's the extent of board bills for perfection.
Alderman from the 22nd, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the board, I move to suspend the rules to move the following board bills from the perfection consent calendar to the third reading consent calendar.
Moved by the Alderman from the 22nd. Entertain a second on that motion. Seconded by the Alderman from the 6th. Any discussion? It's been Alderman from the 24th.
I didn't hear the Alderman from the 22nd mention any bills that were actually moving. But.
Right. No, because he jumped in.
Yeah. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. The following board bills: 268, 235, 242, 260, 269, 270, 271, 238 committee substitute, and 232.
It's been moved by the Alderman from 22nd, seconded. Yes, but it's on the consent calendar just to move it forward, and then you can ask that it be moved to the regular third reading calendar. It's been moved by the Alderman from 22nd.
Mr. President, I'm going to ask a point of order. Would it be okay that I withdraw my motion and reread the motion?
Please withdraw your motion and reread the motion. Go.
I withdrew the motion. Okay. I'd like to reread the motion for clarity. Okay. I'd like to suspend the rules. I move to suspend the rules to move the following board bills from the perfection calendar and consent to the third reading consent. There we go. And the following board bills is 268, 235, 242, 260, 269, 270, 271, 238 committee substitute, and 232.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 22nd. I entertain a second on that motion. Seconded by the Alderman from the 25th. And we suspend the rules for the purposes of bringing the aforementioned bills down to the third reading consent calendar. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Flowers. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderman Conway. Alderman Ortman. Alderman Vollmer. Alderman Villa. Alderman Arnold. Alderwoman Murphy. Alderwoman Howard. Alderwoman Green. Alderwoman Green. Alderwoman Behringer. Alderman Rhodey. Alderman Kennedy. Alderwoman Davis. Alderman Schmid. Alderman French. Alderman Boyd.
Aye.
Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Ogilvie. Alderman Cone. Alderman Williamson. Alderman Carter. Alderwoman Crusom. President Reed. Alderman Villa. Alderman Arnold. Alderwoman Howard. Alderwoman Green. Alderman French. I vote.
By your vote, you sustain the motion of the Alderman from the 22nd and move the aforementioned bills to the third reading consent calendar. Third reading consent.
Board Bills 250, 264, 210, 211, 240, 248, 212, 213, 223, 224, 234, 236, 237, 239, 243, 253, 254, 255, 257, 258, 261, 262, 244, 268, 235, 242, 260, 269, 270, 271, 238, committee substitute, 232.
Alderman from the 18th, you recognize on the third Alderman from the 18th. I know you're busy this morning. Alderman from the 18th, you recognize on motion for the third reading consent calendar.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the board, I move for the adoption of the third reading consent calendar.
Moved by the Alderman from the 18th, seconded by the Alderman from the 9th. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyers. Alderwoman Flowers. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderman Conway. Alderman Ortman. Alderman Vollmer. Alderman Villa. Alderman Arnowitz. Alderwoman Murphy. Alderwoman Howard. Alderwoman Green. Alderwoman Behringer. Alderman Rhodey. Alderman Kennedy. Alderwoman Davis. Alderman Schmidt. Alderman French. Alderman Boyd. Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Ogilvie. Alderman Cone. Alderman Williamson. Alderman Carter. Alderwoman Cruzen. President Reed.
Aye.
Alderman Arnowitz. 27 I vote.
By your vote, sustain the motion. The Alderman from the 18th and 3rd read and finally passed the aforementioned bills. Third reading, report of engrossments.
Board Bill 259, sponsored by Alderwoman Hubbard, an ordinance recommended by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment authorizing the execution of a First Amendment to amend and restated redevelopment agreement by and between the City and Northside Regeneration and containing a severability clause.
Alderman from the 5th, you recognize on the third reading finally passage of Board Bill number 259.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. Basically, what Board Bill...
You need to make a motion.
Oh, I'm sorry. I would like to make a motion for final passage of Board Bill 259.
Moved by the Alderman from the 5th, seconded by the Alderman from the 14th. Alderman from the 5th, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Basically, what Board Bill 259 does is that it amends and permits money in the Special Allocation Fund to be used to cover the cost that SLDC will incur for the Northside project. This money will be used for management consulting services pursuant to an agreement dated November 3rd, 2014 with MWH Americas, Inc., which will assist in the implementation of the Northside Plan. MWH will coordinate and manage the street and alley vacation process, including the required utility abandonment / relocation with the various affected utilities as may be necessary to prepare property for use by the National Geospatial Agency.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 5th, you recognize to close.
I would like to renew my motion.
It's been moved and seconded that we third reading finally pass Board Bill number 259. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyers. Alderwoman Flowers. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Hubbard.
Aye.
Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderman Conway. Alderman Ortman. Alderman Vollmer. Alderman Villa. Alderman Arnowitz. Alderwoman Murphy. Alderwoman Howard. Alderwoman Green. Alderwoman Behringer. Alderman Rhodey. Is that aye? Yes, aye. Alderman Kennedy. Alderwoman Davis. Alderman Schmidt. Alderman French. Alderman Boyd. Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Ogilvie. Alderman Cone. Alderman Williamson. Was that an aye? Alderman Carter. Alderwoman Cruzen. President Reed.
Aye.
Alderman Arnowitz. Alderman Fridge. Alderman Cone. 21 aye votes, 7 no votes.
By your vote, you sustain the motion of the Alderman from the 5th, 3rd read, and finally passed. Board Bill number 259.
Board Bill 265, floor substitute, sponsored by Alderwoman Hubbard and Alderman Bosley, an ordinance approving a redevelopment plan for the Cass, Jefferson, Parnell, Montgomery Street, North 22nd Street redevelopment area.
Madam Clerk, make note of the board bill is 263, floor substitute.
I'm sorry, 263, floor substitute.
Alderman from the 5th, you recognize on 3rd reading and final passage of Board Bill number 263, floor substitute.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to move for adoption of Board Bill 263, floor substitute.
Moved by the Alderman from the 5th. Entertain a second on that motion. Seconded by the Alderman from the 3rd. Alderman, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the board. I believe that it's good to revisit some of the things that we discussed last week, but I think it's more important for us to understand the task that lies before us. I don't want to repeat some of those same arguments that we heard when we perfected this bill, but I would like to change how we characterize Board Bill 263, floor substitute, as amended. I see a development process in a neighborhood that I represent that has been ignored and suffered steady deterioration for more than 60 years. Think about 60 years of disinvestment, when you think about whether or not you should make this decision. But due to an opportunity to save more than 3,100 jobs, let that resonate with us, 3,100 jobs for the city of St. Louis. The residents are getting more attention from more people than anyone can remember. These same residents, some who are homeowners, now have a chance to leave their houses, many on dilapidated blocks, to live in new homes on newly constructed blocks in their same neighborhoods. These are concessions that are being made by myself and just the city in general, because we know that this is an issue that is near and dear to a lot of hearts. And that's something that may not have necessarily been done in the past, but we understand what it means to be connected to your community. And so we've worked long and hard to come up with some strategies to make sure that if people want to stay in their neighborhood, that they can definitely stay in their neighborhood. Some of these homes that I speak of, it would be too expensive for them to upgrade and have improved energy efficiency, like new windows and doors and new heating and cooling systems, among other things. They need modern security features, and I can attest to the fact that some of the members in my community have a hard time doing things as simple as paying utility bills. So clearly, the means are not there. I don't want to generalize everybody, but the means are not there to keep these homes up. So I see this as an opportunity, while some may see it as we're displacing 40 homeowners. And, it's sad that that's what's out there in the media. No one is talking about the numerous calls that I've gotten with people seeing this as a blessing for them to be able to do something better. But I'll stay on task and just further explain that the infrastructure around these homes has collapsed, as the streets, the sewers, and utility services all need attention. Our market-driven economy keeps their property values low and their insurance rates high. the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency originally looked at the old Pruitt Igoe housing complex as a possible site to move their new facility. Now, I agree that early on we all thought that Pruitt Igoe would be the site. I can attest firsthand, some of the atrocities that were associated with Pruitt Igoe. I mean, when you house people in such a manner, a lot of things can happen, and I looked at this as an opportunity for the government to right some of their wrongs. I wrote a 40-page paper on public housing in Pruitt Igoe, and some members of my family are no longer here because of some of the things that took place in Pruitt Igoe. So I think it's definitely important for us to understand that although this area won't totally encompass Pruitt Igoe like we originally thought, that it's a part of this process. Out of 200 potential sites, the site made it to the final 4. Then last year, the agency decided the 35-acre site was too small. They needed approximately 100 acres. That's how we got where we are today. Originally, this area was not this big, but when the federal government came to us and told us that they needed a 500-foot perimeter because this is a national security facility, we had to make some adjustments, and I think that the city worked long and hard on trying to accommodate their demands, and to be quite honest, that's why we are where we are. People feel like that we're moving fast ahead on a gamble, but I say, why not? When I can walk through my ward and see one house on a block, or, despair and think about the 60 years of disinvestment, think about the crime, think about a ward that has the highest rate just in everything. The average household is headed by a female. The average income is less than $20,000. We have the lowest life expectancy, the highest infant mortality rate. So these are the conditions that are happening in the 5th Ward, and I understand that people may feel some type of way because it's their homes, but I tell you this, look out for what's in the best interest of everybody. Just take yourself and your belief on how you feel about your home and where you live in, and think about what's in the greater good of the city. When we think about 3,100 jobs and we think about 2.7 million in earnings tax that we'll lose, trust me, that 2.7 million will have to come from somewhere. And if we know how things has happened in the past, we'll probably feel it before anyone else does. So think about the overall economic impact that this will have on our economy. Don't for one minute think that those people with those 3,100 jobs won't spend $1 in the 5th Ward, won't spend $1 in the city. I mean, they're probably tired of commuting right now. We're in an area that has a TIF, $390 million TIF. That once we lay infrastructure and do things, it'll be right for a lot of great things. And I know if I'm a commuter and I'm living in Wentzville, driving to St. Louis, if there's a house for $200,000 or $300,000 that I could afford, I'm moving close. We have a lot of things going on, and I just ask that people be considerate. Let's talk about the boogeyman in the room that I'm honestly kind of upset about, because people are shoving it down the throats of seniors in my ward when they should be resting in their glory days. They're stressing right now because people are talking about eminent domain. Let's educate ourselves on eminent domain. The city has used it before, but you haven't heard all of this backlash associated with. But I guess I have a problem with so-called activists and protesters, knocking on doors in my ward, threatening people, saying that they're going to lose their homes. This may be a blessing to some of those homeowners, and until you've lived there like I have, and until, you understand the history of the community like my family has, who's been there since the 40s, then you understand whatever type of development we can get, that's a blessing. Everybody is not in a position to say that their home is structurally sound and we've been here so many years and we've did that. That's a minority in my community. We don't even have a lot of homes. We have a lot of apartments, basically. So when I think about where I need to be as a leader, will I stop 3,100 jobs for a few? Now, I'm considerate about it. I understand where the plight is. I understand how it is to have a connection to your community, but I don't think we should sacrifice 3,100 jobs for 30 dwellings, especially when people are willing to offer you a considerable amount of money and are willing to locate you in something new. So, in talking about eminent domain, just know that it's a measure of last resort. And frankly, we hope that we don't even have to use it. But if we do, the city will treat everyone fairly. If you know the history of me and my family and my legacy, we've always helped the downtrodden. We're products of public housing. So we would no way let someone bombard someone out of their home. That just won't happen on my watch, and I won't rest at all. So when you think about that we're going to save thousands of jobs and bring the first large-scale economic development project to North St. Louis in 60 years, that's something to consider. There are only 2 NGA facilities in the nation like the one we have here in St. Louis, but NGA has outgrown its current space. It is looking to build a $1.6 billion facility to grow its operations and workforce. And, you know, we keep talking about the 3,100, but this 3,100 has the potential to create 7,000 jobs. And when you create jobs, you create homes, you create a good school system. And these are the things that people aren't talking about. People are in the media, spewing misinformation, being media hogs, you know, operating on talk and shock without educating themselves on the process. NGA will move if we do nothing. We will lose 3,100 high-paying jobs. The average salary of those jobs is $75,000 a year, and nearly $2.4 million a year. These are not speculations. This is a fact. Like I said, homeowners will be treated fairly. LCRA will work with homeowners to buy their properties at market rate. We'll help them find a new home and pay for their relocation. This doesn't happen in most cases. Homeowners will be given 3 options, and this is something that I've fought hard for, because I understand that just to simply offer someone a new home, it would do a disservice to them to offer them a new home that they can't even afford. I understand that there are some homeowners who don't own anything, and when you are a senior and on a fixed income, because everybody is not blessed to have a retirement and a pension and all of that stuff, but it's important that we make sure that transition is a smooth one, if in fact we have to do it. So of those 3 options, they'll be able to move into an existing home, or either have a new home built for them, or in some cases physically move their existing home to a new lot, or there may be some other creative alternatives presented through this process. SLDC has indicated that it now has approval to offer options to property owners pending selection by NGA. We don't want to have to use the route of eminent domain, and we won't if we don't absolutely have to. The city has experience doing this. Some of the sites where eminent domain has been used is North Broadway Industrial Area near Love's Truck Stop. They used it to assist with Vashon and Cardinal Ritter High Schools and some areas around Fields Food.
Alderman from the 25th, 24th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think I did most of my talking on this last week, but I'll also reiterate, I don't envy anybody, in the position to make this decision. But I think when we're writing the history of St. Louis, I think this is going to appear as a very dismal chapter in that history. And I think it's important that somebody just raise how disgusted some of us feel with the federal government.
We ask the people in the gallery to please refrain.
Under the best case scenario here is that we keep the jobs that are in the city, but we end up with another vacant federal facility off of Broadway, where NGA is right now, that of course there are no plans for. So in the long run, we've moved some jobs around, we've expended some local money, but we haven't expanded the pie at all. The worst case scenario is we end up using eminent domain to push people out, some of which don't want to leave, and we don't keep the facility. And boy, are we going to have egg on our face at that point. Is it any surprise that there's some cities in this country that struggle when this is how the federal government treats us? Every major policy for the last 60 years handed down to us by Washington, D.C. has been to level neighborhoods, to build highways through neighborhoods, to move people out, to force people out, to depopulate St. Louis. And a lot of times we've bought into that as a good thing. And in some cases, I think we've learned our lessons now. But boy, is the damage apparent. And wouldn't it be nice if there was really a sea change and Washington, D.C., and our representatives there said, you know what, we're actually going to support St. Louis. And we're going to support cities like St. Louis that have really taken some major hits because of federal policy. These things were not accidents. So obviously, I think we expect this to pass, and I honestly don't blame people for voting for this. And to be perfectly honest, if I knew NGA was definitely relocating to this area, I would probably hold my nose and vote for it too, because it's a lot of jobs.
We don't have a chance.
But as is, where we have to roll the dice with a gun to our head from the federal government to say, maybe we'll let you keep these jobs, I just think it's an unacceptable position. And there's been 60 years of federal violence committed against this community by the federal government, and I'm sick of it. I've had enough. And so I'm going to vote no. And I hope somebody's listening, because the whole federal government needs to reassess what they've done to cities and what they're doing to cities. And there's a lot of cities like St. Louis that need some help. And I hope this gets somebody's attention in Washington, D.C. Thanks.
All right, thank you. And for Alderman from the 3rd, you recognize.
Mr. President and members of the board, I'm in very much support of this. If any of you would ever choose at this point in time to take a ride between Highway 70 and Salisbury, and Salisbury turns into Jefferson, Jefferson will turn into Broadway, you will see that there is a marked difference in how that looks now. Much of that is in my ward. That place used to be a horrible mess. When people came off of Highway 55, Highway 70, going south on Salisbury, they used to speed through there like 40 going west. And the reason they did is because that whole neighborhood was a mess. And it looked like you were going to get hijacked, your car taken away from you every block you went. But I invite you to go and ride through there now, and you see what has happened. There's over $20 million, much more than that has been spent in that area where Salisbury and North Florissant and Natural Bridge come together. You need to ride over there and look at that now. There's over $500 million worth of development that has taken place over there in that area. And so it's really not wrong, because when you look at Pruitt-Igoe, it's a mess. At one time, it was a beautiful place and the home of so many people who had nowhere else to go. But that's all gone now. And you ride over there, that's a mess. That Pruitt-Igoe site, and some of that's in the 3rd Ward, and that's why I support this bill. There is absolutely nothing that can be done so well that nobody can find fault with it. And I think that because there's an opportunity to bring development opportunities to that area down there, which is a mess today, is a step in the right direction. There is nothing that can be done so well that nobody will find fault with it. Just think about the years ago when there were wagon trains.
Alderman, could you pause for a second? I'd ask the mayor's lobbyist, could you move to one of the designated areas? In the past meetings, I've motioned to you, but I can't get your attention today, so I just want to have to tell you publicly. Alderman, please proceed.
I just think about the times when the wagon trains, and much of that exploration of the West began down there where we got that arch now. Suppose it hadn't started down there. There is such a terrible mess over there at that Pruitt-Igoe site. And I invite you to take a ride between Jefferson Avenue, which is the only street in the entire city of St. Louis that goes from one end of the city to the other. You get off old highway, the highway over there, 70, and you come over Salisbury. Salisbury turns into Jefferson. Jefferson turns into Parnell, and Parnell turns into the Broadway. If you go and ride through there, some of that is so ugly, but when you get off that highway, that was because people took the opportunity and bit the bullet and went in there and fixed up all of that stuff. When you go through there now between Highway 70 and Natural Bridge, that is a very, very nice neighborhood now. And what's going to happen when we go and rehab, restore, rebuild what's on the other side of Natural Bridge? It's going to be a positive to the city. And I know people don't like it, but as ugly as it can be right now. And we need to do something. And the journey of 1,000 miles starts at a single step. And if you don't take a step, you're not going anywhere. And that is a mess over there right now. And we need to be able to go in there and do something, because whatever we do that's going to be positive is going to attract other people to come in there and invest some money. The city doesn't have it. We don't have enough money to pay enough people to keep our streets clean on a regular basis and our alleys paved on a regular basis. We laid off so many city employees because we didn't have the money. But if we're able to bring people in to rehab an area like that Pruitt-Igoe site down there, that's going to bring more money into the city, where we'll be able to do some things in neighborhoods that you who are complaining don't even live in down there. But it's also going to help your neighborhood, because whenever you improve one portion of the city, it helps us all. So I'm not in favor of anybody losing their property, their land, and not at all. But we certainly need to do something about that ugly site down there at Pruitt-Igoe. At one time, that was the place where people who could go nowhere else had an opportunity to live in a safe, sanitary, decent house. But when you go look at it now, there's a mess over in there now, and it needs to come down, and we need to be able to do something else, because this city doesn't have enough land to go and expand. We are landlocked, and what we need to do is take what we got, fix it up, rehabilitate it, and be able to attract more people in here who would ordinarily run someplace else because of that ugly down there. So I invite everybody to take a ride, get off of Highway 70 over there, and you come down Salisbury. Salisbury turns into Jefferson. Jefferson turns into, I forgot that street, Parnell. And you go ride through there and see how horrible that looks now. But when you get off of Highway 70 and you look to your left, well, all those new buildings over there and those people that are living in those apartments, in those townhouses, they have an opportunity to purchase that. After they've been in there and paid the rent for 15 years, they get a chance to purchase it, and some of the money that they put into that building goes towards them being able to rehab, buy those properties that are over there. So I know up front you don't like it. But all you have to do is go through there now and see what you got. Anything will be better than that. And I think this plan is going to be a whole lot better than that. And it's going to add to the base, to the tax base of this city. And the city needs money very badly.
All right, thank you, Alderman. Alderman from the 21st.
Mr. President, I rise in opposition to this board bill for a few reasons. First is that we're constantly faced down here with a series of false choices. And we're told that somehow simply passing this bill that gives broad authority, which includes eminent domain authority, will lead to the NGA relocating and us somehow retaining those approximately 3,000 jobs. But that is not the case. As I said last week, what we're talking about here is a gamble. There is no certainty that NGA is going to choose that location. There are other locations they are looking at. Those other locations do not at all require the same amount of pre-work done as we're proposing doing. And so the only thing that we know for sure will happen is that the city, through its entity, LCRA, will go out and borrow $8 to $10 million to acquire land and negotiate with property owners, including business owners, to acquire their property under the threat of eminent domain. And at the end of the day, after a year, maybe a year and a half, before the NGA makes their decision, the city will have basically flattened a neighborhood. And if NGA decides, which is a very good chance they will, to locate somewhere else other than the city of St. Louis, we will have forced out folks from their houses. We will have flattened a neighborhood. We will have reaffirmed what many people already believe, which is that the city of St. Louis does not care much about the folks who live in these neighborhoods. If you drive through those neighborhoods now, if someone from outside came to St. Louis and visited and drove through those neighborhoods now, what they would notice and they would see is that this seems to be an area that the city of St. Louis does not really care that much about. Well, that's how folks have felt over there for a very long time. 6 years ago, this body passed a development agreement giving sole authority to develop that large area over there to one single developer who has run into all kinds of troubles. And as a result, half a decade later, we haven't seen anything close to what was promised. And so one of the things he asked for from the very beginning was eminent domain authority. And we promised, people promised in countless meetings down there that in no way would their homes be taken by way of eminent domain for this development. In the questioning in committee on this board bill and questioning the folks from LCRA and SLDC, we asked them, so what happens if NGA does not take this site? The city will have borrowed close to $10 million, maybe more, to acquire all of this, and we're stuck with it. How are we going to pay that money back? What are we going to do with all that land over there? Is there a plan B? And we were told basically that plan B is Paul McKee. And that to me is a go around to give him eminent domain power, which you've been asking for from the beginning. And so we do need to ask those questions about what if it doesn't play out in the best case scenario. Best case scenario is that the NGA decides to take that, redevelop that area, put a very large amount of money into redeveloping that area and bring new life there. And in fact, if that is what we were voting on, I would probably vote for it. But that is not what we're voting on. What we're voting is to take a seat at the gambling table, and the ante that we have to pay are these folks' homes. And to me, that's just plain wrong. That's just immoral, in fact. It's just wrong. And, you know, sometimes we have some tough choices down here, but to me, this isn't a tough choice. In an area like City of St. Louis, which unfortunately has so much vacant land, so many vacant parcels, to think that we would have to take people's houses or even threaten to take people's houses or businesses in order to acquire enough land for development is just it's just mind-blowing. And so I'm going to vote against this as I did last week, and I encourage other people to vote against it as well. Because one thing we do want the City of St. Louis to be is a place that is welcoming, a place that appreciates those folks who have stuck it out, appreciate those homeowners and those businesses that have suffered, especially in some of the roughest neighborhoods in our city, for decades when we haven't done what we're supposed to do as a city. And so I would disagree a little bit with my colleague from the 24th. This isn't a situation that the federal government created for us. This is a situation that we created for ourselves. The city of St. Louis has done an awful job over the last decades of maintaining the quality of life in neighborhoods, of protecting the rights of citizens, of protecting the rights of people to live free of violence, free of the awful effects of negligent homeowners and property owners, which Paul McKee has been over there for many years. And so when we now talk about giving authority to a government agency to come and sit down with these folks to negotiate for the purchase of their home under the threat of eminent domain and saying that somehow they are going to get fair market value, we do so knowing that fair market value has been artificially lowered for over 10 and 20 years over there. And that the actions not only of Mr. McKee, but even of this board in granting him such broad authority and not holding him accountable for promised development, promised upkeep of properties, have lowered property values and have driven tens of hundreds of people from those areas. And so what we're left with is a mess. And it's we can't put it all on the federal government. We can't even put it all on Mr. McKee. It's really a failure of St. Louis City government and failure of leadership. And so now we're here, and we are asked to value tax revenue generated from one entity over the property taxes, the sales taxes, the earnings taxes generated from the people who live in that area. We're asked to value a gamble over the property rights of folks who have stuck it out for years without the proper support from the city. And it's just wrong. And it's just wrong. The St. Louis Business Journal ran an article yesterday which highlighted another angle. We've talked a lot about property owners, and I think the property owners do deserve, the homeowners do deserve the most attention. But there are also businesses over there, businesses that have been there for a very long time. And the Business Journal profiled a few of these businesses. And they're not happy with the idea of their family businesses being threatened with eminent domain. They're not thrilled with the idea of having to sit down with a government entity under the threat of eminent domain and negotiate a sales price for not only their building and all the equipment of their businesses inside those buildings, but their years and years of hard work of maintaining a business, building a business in the city of St. Louis, which is not easy to do, especially in those neighborhoods. And so to have their government turn on them like this, I think sends an awful signal. And we do this too often down here, where we pick winners and losers. Ballpark Village was another good example. You know, we bought into this idea and this promise of pie in the sky type things that really logically were not going to happen. It didn't happen, and at the end of the day, in order just to make something happen, we wound up picking winners over losers. And many of the businesses down there who have been there forever are now having to compete with a largely subsidized new venture, and it's just unfair. We do that with hotels. It's tough to maintain a hotel in the city of St. Louis, and then we come in and we pick a winner and subsidize them and make it even tougher for other businesses to survive. And here we go again, picking winners and losers, and this one couldn't be a more clear case. It is clear who the losers will be. A lot of them are represented today up in the balcony here, and they're asking to be heard. They have the signs. I can only imagine how frustrating that is. They live in this area, and they are the last to be considered, the very last to be considered. And that's just not how we should govern in this city. I think it sends an awful message, and I think it reaffirms too many people's beliefs that the city of St. Louis too often values money over people, and I think that's wrong.
All right, thank you. Alderwoman from the first.
Mr. President, members of the board, I rise to oppose this Board Bill 263. I've been opposed to it from pretty much the beginning. I was opposed to it before I came back to this board when originally Mr. McGee's land print or footprint was much larger, and it was going to probably encompass some of the land that I own. In fact, I called the alderman from the 3rd at that point, who assured me that it would not include that part, and it didn't. I want to thank the alderman from the 3rd from talking about that part of Hyde Park that runs from Natural Bridge on Salisbury over to I-70. I have been a long-time supporter. The alderman knows that. Even before he was the alderman of the 3rd, when it used to be the 2nd Ward, I have been down in Hyde Park rehabbing. I believe in older properties. I live in an older property that's almost 100 years old. You don't have to tear everything down. If you travel to Europe and things like that, what we call old, dilapidated, they call an opportunity, okay? So Europe does not tear their buildings down. They rehab them, and when you go there, you'll see a very different look. So when the alderman talks about look at what you see in Hyde Park and how that's been taken care of and what he's doing, he's doing a great job. But I was there when everybody said, just what they're saying now about this, that could not happen. We went down to Hyde Park in 1979. And people said, why are you spending your dollars down there? What are you doing? Why are you investing? You invest about things that you care about, or you invest about things that you want to make money. I wanted to do both of them. Haven't made a lot of money, but care about the community. Do my business when I'm down there. If you go and talk to all the little shop owners, they know us. Because when I'm down there working, I'm in their businesses. I'm in the hardware store. I've been going to Crown Candy since 1979, which accounts for the weight that I've gained. But I've been to the hardware store down there. They all know me from going to the small businesses and being a part of it. I watched, if we sank $30 million plus down in the, the 13th Street Mall, whatever it is. I remember when they closed it off and then opened it back up. Been down there for a long time. Know a lot of the people down there. Watched them stand their ground, black and white, and not move. Really, we, the city, should be looking at Hyde Park and the surrounding neighbors as a way of what should happen, instead of as soon as somebody black moves in, we're moving. The white people down there, they did not move. They stayed. They planted their feet. They rehabbed. They were not scared of color. They were scared of what was your character, not of what your color was. So just because you were black and you moved someplace, they didn't move. They stayed there. As I said before last week, everybody on the block that I own a property that's a central piece of property in Hyde Park is white. And they were very nervous when we did that building, but they'll all tell you that we take care of the building. So when I drove through, the alderman didn't have to ask me to drive through the area. I drive almost every day because I'm a hands-on landlord. But I hadn't been up into where Miss Taylor lived, and that's my mistake. So I just drive down Jefferson, Parnell, Jefferson, I'm going home, or I turn on St. Louis Avenue. So I did go up in there. If you just drive down Jefferson, you can see some horrid conditions. You can see some of the houses that the alderman from the 4th has to deal with, where the bottom of the houses have just, the back of them are just falling down. And those can't be saved. And I don't try to pretend that they can't. But you will also see beautiful structures. I look at Ms. Taylor's house, way better than the structures that we did. We did 4 buildings at 19th and Malincrod, and we did several other apartments. But the one at 19th and Malincrod didn't have a roof, had all kind of problems with it. And we rehabbed it back in 1980. First person moved in 89, I guess it is. And it had no roof, had no back. We had to rehab it. We had to redo a wall. There was all kind of work we put into it. We didn't have the money, and we continued to put money into it. It was before I got to the board. We did get somewhat of a forgivable loan, and some that wasn't forgivable that I said we paid back. January the 23rd, it was due, and we paid it back. But the neighborhood isn't worth investing. When you have stakeholders who don't leave, who sit there and day after day and month after month and year after year, and they are willing to put their life savings, their efforts into something, it sends a horrific message to people when they see how the city says, well, we got these 3,000 jobs we got to save, and so we got to weigh where you live against these 3,000 jobs. And of course everybody wants to save jobs. We do need the money. We need the income. But you still also have to look at the history of how did that neighborhood get to be the way it is. What has been the history of what we have done to neighborhoods in certain communities? How do they get that way? people will have you believe, well, all the people that live there, they just didn't take care of it, and so it went down. That's mostly not true. People love where they live, and if they're homeowners, they try to do the best they can. They may not be the richest of people, but they will do the best that they can. What is true is when you talk about the conditions of the streets and the sewers and stuff, is that the city didn't take care of it. Okay? They didn't do their part because they made some calculated decisions. I always talk about the Team 4 plan, and people laugh and poo-poo that as, oh, ho, 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 ho. But when you read the Team 4 plan, which I have a copy, that it talks about the disinvestment in North St. Louis and how to do that best. And you didn't have to, and people will say, oh, we didn't, we never brought that down here, and we didn't ever pass that down at the Board of Aldermen. No, we didn't pass it, but you don't have to. Mayor Shamo was famous in saying you don't have to pass a plan to do it. And exactly, you do not have to. You can just, and it's not even so benignly, you can just not give service. You can make it so hard for the alder people that represent that community that you have to fight all the time. I drive through my alleys after the people picked up the trash, and my neighborhood is homeowners. And I have to call, why didn't you pick up this? Why didn't you do this? It's a disinvestment, a disincentive to live there. We have decided that this is not worth putting the time and the money. We're going to put it someplace else. Other places you would not dare do that, but you can get away with that. You pick on the people that are, it's easy to get away with doing that. So that's what the city did. And part of the Team 4 plan says that how do we get people out? One of the things we do when we do this disinvestment in North St. Louis is that we make light industrial, okay? We make things like that. And we come up with, and that's what we're doing now. This is light industrial. I looked at these plans, how they've ever changed since this first thing, when we first started talking about this. And people talked about Pruitt-Igoe sitting there for a long time. But for many years, I think most people might know this, the city didn't own Pruitt-Igoe. The federal government owned it, and we wanted it. We fought to get Pruitt-Igoe, which we finally got. So we have Pruitt-Igoe. We didn't know what to do with it. It had been better to let the federal government keep it, and they got the money, but we have Pruitt-Igoe. And then now we found out that Pruitt-Igoe is not such a good place, I told, to put this new project that started out. That's what we were going to do. So I kind of looked at what kind of acreage are we talking about? Because not only did I talk to lawyers about the amendment who laughed, the alderman from the 22nd got up last week and said, I think the amendment is great, and it was innovative, and it adds another layer of protection. It's, do you have the gun to my head, or do you have the gun a few steps away? You still got a gun to my head. When you have eminent domain is the ability of the government to take the person's property without their consent. And that we didn't take that out of the bill in committee. We did a substitute or amendment, and it says, well, you have to come back for each parcel when you want to do eminent domain. We did not add, had I known that the President's office was coming with this, I should have had, and I want to say this is my failure, I should have also added that we need a clause that says if we do not do this, that we need to take eminent domain out, okay? We need a sunset clause. We can do that with things that says, okay, this is here, but if this doesn't happen, we're not going to keep that gun over your head that we can take your property. That's what we need, and that's my failure because I didn't offer it, and I was very angry with myself when I left, and I claimed that because I should have offered it as an amendment. It may not have passed, but it should be an amendment that says if we are not, so if the only reason we're doing this eminent domain is because we got to save these jobs, if we don't get picked, why are we still leaving eminent domain in there? Okay? There's no reason for that to happen, and that's what happens when people who are doing amendments and writing legislation and don't talk to people. But I looked at the whole situation. I talked to some city planners, and they started laughing at me, and I'm married to a city planner, and he said, well, when I hear this plan, it's very anti-urban. You're asking for 136 acres of property. So I started looking around. What's the city of St. Louis? The city of St. Louis is approximately 66 square miles, which is 42,368 acres. Forest Park is 1,371 acres. The current NGA site is nothing. I don't know what the exact acreage is, but the new acreage they need is 138 acreage. And I started thinking about, well, boy, why do they need such a beautiful facility? I know the FBI is right down the street from headquarters, right down the street from City Hall on Market. They don't have that kind of acreage. I said, well, let's see, who is the most famous resident in the United States? That would be the White House. So let's see how many acreage that the White House has. The White House has 18 acres. And then they have a little part to the south that's 34 acres. So, and those 34 and 18 acres make up 52 acres, and that's called the President's Park. And so the President of the United States only needs 52 acres, but NGA needs 136 acres. And by the way, it's not really Pruitt-Igoe anymore. We want the place where the people live, because we need where you live, because we're more important than where you live. Getting these 3,000 jobs, that's more important, even though we don't really have a guarantee. But talking to other planners, they said, when you ask for that kind of acreage, 136 acres, that's not an urban plan. That's pretty much telling you they're not looking for urban. Most of the time, there's not many urban centers, unless you go to the easiest place to displace people, which are the marginalized and the people that you feel you decided are less important. You can't get 136 acres. The only place you can get 136 acres in most wards, you have to take their parks. We can go to Forest Park and get it. We might be able to go to Fairground Park and get it. We can go to Wilmore Park and get it. You can't come even to what is now called the first, used to be the 20th, and get 136 acres, okay? That is an anti-urban plan. That is a plan that is laid out for a suburban community, okay? And so in order to do it, we're falling and tripping over ourselves. We're telling people we're willing to put the gun to the heads of people who have been here for stakeholders for 60 years or more, and we're going to move them out because we're going to save that. The alderman from the 24th said that we will have egg on our face if we don't get this. No, we won't, because I do believe that there's a plan B. Paul McGee may be plan B, but they got a plan C and a plan D. Because Paul McGee, after 6 years, has not put one rock in the ground in the city of St. Louis. He has not done anything. So if we don't get it and we give it back to him, he'll be back here with another thing. But what I think the real thing that will happen is that they're going to divide this development into smaller parcels. And this way, we will have accumulated this land under the pretense that we were getting it because we're saving the 3,000 jobs. And we won't talk about anymore that, oh, we didn't get that. And by the way, we want to take this gun away from your head. How do you deal with having property up in the middle of something and living when you know that at any point you can have eminent domain come on you? How do you sell that? How if somebody wants to move in it? What if you own property like that? How do you live under the threat of eminent domain when we've been saying for 5-6 years that will not be? We, the government, have not dealt with these people in good faith. It is wrong to tell people 5 or 6 years you're not going to have eminent domain, and then to have a bill introduced on the 23rd or so of January, have it heard that next Wednesday. It didn't get out of committee a few days later. Then we have it that Friday, and it gets out of committee all of a sudden, and then we have a second a perfection and third reading within it's less than a month. Okay, so in less than a month, we have changed our entire presentation as to what will happen, and we are telling the people you're not as important because we got to save these jobs, and so it has to be the backs of someone, and so it might as well be you. My suggestion is it might as well be someplace else. All those people who think that eminent domain is a good thing, I would suggest to them, let's put it on Lindo. Let me add me, because I don't, but let's put it on Marketplace, because the people would be hanging you. Okay, let's put it over on Euclid, North Euclid. Let's put it in all these neighborhoods down in Wilmore Park. Let's put it every place where people says, well, we need to keep these 3,000 jobs, and so what we have to do is that we have to do it at the expense of other people. Because I've been opposed to eminent domain for a long time. I did say, so let me say again, I have had it in a bill before. It was never on owner-occupied property. So there are some limited circumstances where I could see that it would have to be used, but it was very, very limited. And as I said, when I used it, it was for where the Snooks is at Union and Natural Bridge, and we didn't end up having to use it because they did make a deal. But now I do understand that just by having it in the bill, that made that person have to make a decision that maybe they didn't want to do. So I'm not trying to say I haven't used it, but I have never used it against owner-occupied houses. That is something that, especially when you look at the consideration of how long people have been places and their opportunities. They didn't have an opportunity to buy over in Holly Hills. They didn't have an opportunity to buy on Lindo. They didn't have an opportunity to buy in Wilmore Park, because let's talk about St. Louis, the home of the restricted covenants that said black people could not even live in certain neighborhoods, okay? So for years we had these kinds of laws that didn't allow us to, black people to even buy in certain neighborhoods. And we also are famous for having members, the first members of the Board of Aldermen, Alderman Clay, and I'm talking about Bill Clay, who became a congressman. He's the person that back many years ago sponsored a public accommodation bill, because we had aldermen down here that were members of the Board of Aldermen that couldn't even go into restaurants or to places because St. Louis didn't allow them to. So now we shoot up a few more years. We get here. We are in the year of, we have a black president, and racism is gone, and sexism is gone, and ageism is gone, and so we are just all doing things of what's in the best interest. We are not going to talk about that because that's the past, and so we don't want to talk about how it got to be this way. We're going to just talk about, that's too bad. You're the easiest people to do this to, and so we will do this to you. We're not listening to the people who are telling us, protesters telling us we don't like what you're doing. And I'm not just talking about the people that's sitting up here in this, upstairs there. I'm talking about the young kids. We are not listening. We are tone deaf with what we want to do, and it's okay if we can get away with it. I got sent a article about 9 ways privileged people can reduce the negative impact of gentrification. And there are some really good ideas about things. And the first one is to understand that when you're doing gentrification, and that's what this is that you don't have to displace people. You don't have to move them out. You need to work with them. Get them at the table. If this is really such a great idea, then like minds can agree. We've had years, 6 years before when Paul McGee was around here, to know that we might need some more land. Why haven't we been negotiating with the people at that time? Why haven't we? And I know that Otis Williams said that we could not use any kind of contingencies to buy in case we got that. But I think that is just awful. So I've been writing to people, the federal government, and as have the neighbors, to find out, is that even true? Really? You really can't do this? Where is it? I'm still asking that question. Where is it that says that we cannot use some kind of contingency, that we'll buy your property if we need to, and have come to some kind of agreement with people? I don't think that's what we want to do. I think it's easier. We got the votes. We strong-arm it. We got a good cause now. We're saving 3,000 jobs. Now, that's great. It didn't sound good for Paul McGee. That wasn't going to be something that maybe we could get the people to vote, some other people to vote for. But when you start talking about 3,000 jobs, and people get very selfish. So the people who are not affected says, well, we need those jobs. We need that. Now, if it was their house, it would be a different story. But because it's not their house, they think that's all right, and they're willing to do it. And I think everybody needs to put themselves in the place. Would they be doing this to their mother, to their grandmother, to their aunt, to their uncle, to their family members? Would it be okay if one of your family members was in the middle of this? Would you really be pushing to take their property if your grandparent had owned a piece of property for 50 or 60 years? I know I wouldn't. I am fortunate. On my husband's side, we rehabbed and bought his grandfather's 4-family flat in the 4800 block of Northland, and we keep that up. And he bought that in the 50s, first time he could buy a piece of property, and he was so proud of it. So I understand this pain. He was so proud of it. He died at 98, and he was so proud to be able to own property. And he kept that, and so we wanted to keep that in the family. We have a piece of property that black people have owned since the 50s. A lot of times, African Americans don't get to do that. You lose your property if you own property down south. It was tricked out of you. Were tricked of it. You didn't do certain things, and you lost that. But we have a heritage. Same thing on my side. My grandmother was never able to afford property, and when my uncle got out of the Vietnam War, she had 3 sons that went to war, and 2 of them were in Vietnam, 2 of them at the same time. One of them came out and bought his mother a house because she had never had the privilege of being able to own property as a black woman. And so she is so proud. So my family still has that. We are property owners a couple of generations now, but I still know the time when we could not be property owners. So I'm very, very aware of that's not something I want to take away from people, and especially their homestead. In looking at what kind of things, I've been doing research. One of the things that the Missouri Revised Statutes talks about is that if you do a eminent domain, there is a determination of homestead taking and heritage value. And that's so interesting to me. So we place a value on your homestead and taking. This, and when I look around here and I see these Native Americans who are also my ancestors, we came over to a land, many of us, and we took a land in which people were already here, and we renamed them. Our history is not a clean one, not clean hand, and we renamed them, you're Indians, because we discovered you. Never mind you're not in India, but you're Indians. So I don't use that term. They were Native Americans. They helped us. If they had not helped many of our ancestors, we would not have made it. But they looked at the land a different way. They looked at land as something that you respected. You took just what you needed. You didn't take too much, and that's how they worked. And that was the same way they did in Africa and many other lands. We decided that we could own land, we could divide it up, and we kept spreading out. And so we have a value on this. But y'all were very loud. Thank you. So we decided that we can make in its Missouri Revised Statutes 523.061 that talks about what is the value of homestead taking and heritage value. So after we do all this to them, we can give people more money because you actually may have a heritage and a value to living in your own community. That's the very value that people keep discounting. But I know from living next door to a person who lived to be 102 years old, there is a value living next door to someone. There is a value to getting up and speaking to your same neighbors year after year. There is a value as you get older in being familiar in your circumstances and being able to stay in your own homes. And there is a value in neighborhood, and there's a value in people who stay in their property year after year, even though the city has purposefully, what I call that, purposefully disinvested in their property and purposely told them that they have little and no value, that they have the decency and the grace and the determination to say, this is my home. I'm not going to let it go down. I'm going to put my time and energy into keeping my house up. I'm going to keep my property up, and I'm going to wait for the city to be wrong. I'm lucky. As an investor, the alderman of the 3rd Ward came along and put all those $500 million all around my property. But 20 years ago, I can remember the comptroller, former comptroller Burvis Jones, saying to me, why you all put so much money in that property? People didn't believe that it could happen. Things can happen. Any neighborhood can turn around if you want to put enough money. I know what the 6th Ward used to look like down in Lafayette Square. I know what Soulard used to look like. I know what the Central West End used to look like. If you put enough money, then you can have things turn around. But we determined that the money usually goes to white neighborhoods, and we devalue black property in black neighborhoods. And so we determined that North St. Louis is black, which, again, I will say, there are many white people sitting up there that live in North St. Louis, and if it was all black or it was all white, I would still take the same position. We have no business taking people's property for something that's dubious at best and an evil plan at worst. I am hoping that we will remember that eminent domain is eminent domain versus it is a taking of personal property against the owner's right. It is it's very interesting. This country was founded on we're not able to get representation with, and we're paying taxes. I would just really, really wonder what our forefathers would think of eminent domain now. If that was something they really contemplated, that we would be able to come into your house and say, yes, you've kept your house up, you've paid for all your taxes, you've done what you're supposed to do. We, the city, have not done what we're supposed to do, yet we are going to come in and devalue your property, and devalue your determination, devalue your right as a property owner, and take that. I can just imagine if somebody would come to the United States and want to do that on a bigger level. It is wrong. I hope that we remember that we do not have these jobs. And if this is going to get passed, I hope that the sponsor of this bill will be open to coming back and adding a sunset clause that says if we do not get these jobs, that we take the eminent domain clause out so that we cannot have these people living under the threat of a what if, maybe, and what are we going to do. I don't believe that they really need 136 acres. If the White House doesn't need but a few acres, the FBI doesn't need but a few acres, but we're taking them at their word. We got to have 136 acres. That's got to be that they were looking to go someplace someplace rural or someplace out in the suburbs. You don't ask for that kind of acreage in an urban community. And I, again, am opposed to this board bill and hope that we could defeat it.
Hold on for a second. We have a lot of visitors today, and we have to maintain a certain amount of decorum in the chambers. So please hold your applause and everything so we can continue to move the meeting and everybody gets an opportunity to hear the debate. Alderman from the 11th had asked to speak, and then the Alderman from 22nd. So.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to briefly state my objections to Board Bill 263. I just really feel that the track record of the principles involved in Northside regeneration is fester. I don't see anything positive that they have ever accomplished other than get $50 million worth of tax credits from the state of Missouri, which wound up expiring because they just didn't quite turn that first shovel of dirt. And again, I said last week, I think it's silly to get up here and get personal. I will not do that. I know it's the only show in town, but it's a bad show. There's nothing that they can point to that is evidence that they are good developers. The file for a certificate of need to build a 2-bed emergency hospital waited about 5 weeks, and they decided, well, I'm just going to move it 2.5 blocks this way, so it's in this particular plan. So you can imagine the drawings were very well done. Just decided in 2 weeks we're just going to move this emergency hospital. Mr. President, may I briefly inquire the Alderman from the 24th?
Alderman from the 24th, will you yield for questioning to the Alderman from the 11th?
I'll always yield to the Alderman from the 11th.
Alderman from the 11th, please proceed.
Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. President, we ride bikes together.
Okay. I've ridden with the Alderman from the 24th. He's pretty fast. So
the both of you are pretty fast. That's my concern sometimes, yeah. Alderman, I'm reading with interest here the agenda from the Board of E&A this past Wednesday afternoon, at which they gave approval to Board Bill 259. Board Bill 259 we just did without my help some 22 minutes ago. And that calls for the approval of Board Bill 259 by our city's chief fiscal body. This ordinance approves the First Amendment to the TIF and restated redevelopment agreement with Northside Regeneration LLC. It permits money in the special allocation fund to be used to cover the cost SLDC will incur for Northside project management consulting services pursuant to an agreement dated such and such. And that's going to be with MWH America Inc. I think last week I inquired as to who the principals were there, and we didn't know. We did see their letterhead, so we know they have a letterhead. I guess my question is, if in fact, is it your understanding that this acreage is going to have the luxury of tax increment financing?
Yes, unless I am deeply misinformed, which may have happened once or twice in the past. Yeah, if NGA chooses to relocate into this area, we'll be taking this $2.4 million in earnings tax, which has been the figure used, and I just did the math, and to me that figure looks pretty accurate. We'll be taking that, which we collect all of right now, of course. We'll be putting that into an area that already has tax increment financing authorized, and I don't have that TIF bill in front of me, the $390 million TIF bill, which we approved, maybe a year ago. But that would mean that the TIF is going to take half the earnings tax. So it's not really accurate to argue.
Would you repeat that?
Yes. It's not really accurate to argue that this is an effort for the city to retain $2.4 million in earnings tax. It's an effort for the city to retain half of that earnings tax, because half is going to go into the TIF fund and the other half will go into general revenue. And that, of course, doesn't include whatever current revenue we're generating out of this site. There's some businesses, residences there, of course. So the net is not $2.4 million. The net is much closer to $1 million. And in fact, even if they do relocate there, just so we're clear-eyed on what the math actually is, we're actually, even with the relocation, we're probably losing about $1.4 million in earnings tax, because that'll go into the TIF. And this is sort of the pattern. This is the damned if you do, damned if you don't pattern that we have gotten stuck in. And the alderman from the 21st mentioned Ballpark Village. It's the same situation. You're just robbing from Peter to pay Paul, essentially. We're not selling any more beer downtown than we ever sold before. We're just giving away half the tax revenue on the beer that we do sell. So hopefully that gets to the heart of your question.
Thank you, Alderman. Thanks for the inquiry. Mr. President, just in closing, I don't think this makes sense. I really, really fear. We did in the 11th Ward, took one home by eminent domain, and when I say we, my predecessor, my nephew, it is nightmarish, and this was one lady. Now the end result was Loughborough Commons, which has Schnucks. It's a wonderful facility that generates a lot of tax, but by God, that one lady did not want to move off of Loughborough. Actually, she lived on South Grand Avenue right behind it. And it's sticky, it's ugly, it's a displacement of what people call home. And as a result of that, that may just be one reason that I think this particular ordinance is ill-advised. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Alderman from 22nd.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I wasn't planning on making any comments, but I think it's only appropriate if you get called out that you can really state your position better than anybody else can. And what I said last week was that the amendment that was placed in this bill was clever, thoughtful, and considerate. And I believe it was you, Mr. President, that offered the amendment in the bill.
Yes.
And the reason I said it was clever, thoughtful, and considerate, because it adds another layer to the eminent domain process. What it says is that before SLDC can exercise eminent domain through the court system, that a resolution has to be brought before the HUD's committee. At that time, the HUD's committee can vote that resolution up or down. And let's suppose that they voted up for passage. It still has to come before the Board of Aldermen, this body, and get 15 votes out of 29. That is why I suggested that it was clever, thoughtful, and considerate. Now, in the history of me being down here, That has never been in a piece of legislation that had eminent domain. And I would like to know if there's any senior alderman down here that knows if it's ever in the history of them being down here over 30 years being in a piece of legislation. So again, I suggested it was clever, thoughtful, and considerate. Now, what the alderwoman from the first ward suggested was, it's like holding a loaded gun up to somebody's head. Well, not the way I analogize this bill, because if it is a loaded gun up to somebody's head, it has no bullets, because they'll have to come back to the Board of Aldermen, the HUD's committee, to load it. And then they have to come back to the full board to fire it. So I disagree that it's a loaded gun. And what's so great about public discourse is we all have an opinion. It doesn't mean that one person's opinion is better than the next person's opinion. What we do with our opinions is we massage them and we try to make a bill that's bad good, or we can make a bill that's good better. That is what public discourse is all about. That is why we have people that are against it, whether they're the legislative body or they're the public. And that's why we also have people that may be for it. Now, it was brought up if someone would do it to their family. Well, my mom, and we talk quite often, she lives on a corner of Emerson and Lillian. And I bet you a year's salary that if you offered a bill with eminent domain, she'd be one of the first people to call you and say, when you going to buy my house? Because she's tired of living around all the chaos that goes on in her neighborhood. She's lived over there for over 30 years. So in this process, there'll be some people that's happy about what's going on, and there'll be some people that's sad about what's going on. Unfortunately, a legislative body cannot make everybody happy. Unfortunately, sometimes there's winners and there's losers. Now, my personal philosophy in life is about a win-win strategy in which we all can win. And again, what I like about this board bill with the amendment, Mr. President, that you put on the bill is that it gives an added layer of protection. If eminent domain will be authorized, it will be the HUD's committee that starts it. It would not be this full body. But if this full body agrees with the HUD's committee, then it shall happen. The authorization, until then, it will never happen. So that is my position on the bill, and I stand by the fact that it is clever, it was thoughtful, and it was considerate. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman from first.
Members of the board, I'm quite sure that the alderman can speak for his mother. I can't speak for mine because she's an independent person, and so I would never dare to try to do that. But I will say that if he is true in speaking for his mother and saying that she would be glad to have it, then she is not the person that Ms. Taylor is, who is not glad to have it. I am not speaking to the people who say, buy me out, I will take this, this is what I want to do. Because you don't need eminent domain for those people, because they will sell you their land. So that is not what eminent domain speaks to, first of all. Second of all, just because we think something is clever, I do not cut hair. So if you let me cut your hair, I might think it's a clever haircut, but you will be in trouble, okay? There are people who are trained to do things. My mother always told me about opinions and the varied opinions. Yes, we are elected and we can have varied opinions, but some of them have more learned opinions than others. If you cut hair, you have a better opinion than I do about how to cut hair, okay? If you march and you're a soldier, you have more insight about being a soldier than I do. But although we may not think that this is legal down here, the Board of Aldermen, we pass legal legislation. And I've been down here now 30 years because I had my little party in which I was off, but I've been down here long enough, and I can answer that no, I never saw this put into something that says you have to, this amendment that you have to come back to the board. But I also was not given upfront a notice after speaking to your office when something else is supposed to happen. So I don't want to get into what happened. I'm being kind of closed-mouthed, but I can open up and tell everything. I can say, but I'm not going to do that because you're not the one raising the point. The alderman from the 22nd is raising the point, but it's some more point that I can make, okay? And I'm just not. I'm going to say this. It is a step to say it has to come back, as I understood it, in order to have a resolution, it doesn't come back to the HUD's committee. Someone has to introduce it on the floor. Then it comes to the HUD's committee. Then it comes back. I didn't know that we were talking about, and that's not what was explained to me in committee, where the alderman from the 22nd was not there. It was that it would have to have a resolution introduced here on this floor, and then it would have to go to the HUD's committee, and then it would have to come back here. So that is how I understood it. So if it's different, that's the understanding that I got when I was asking questions, not making assumptions. So the whole thing about what's good and what's not, it is in the eye of who is being, the alderwoman from the 4th used to be Bertha Mitchell. She was elected right when I was in 91, and she used to always talk about whose ox is being gored. And I was so appreciative of not only her, but the 15th Ward alderwoman at that time was Geraldine Osborne, because I had 2 women that I could go to and talk to about things that very different perspectives, very different. And often I would be in the office and they would talk about what they had experienced. But Bertha Mitchell would always talk about whose ox is being gored. If your ox is being gored, that's not a good thing. I just saw a little cartoon on the Facebook, and people were rabbit hunting, and the guys were all talking about how fun it was to rabbit hunt. And then the rabbit had a gun, and the guys all talked about it's no more fun when the rabbit has the gun, okay? Yeah, so it is a great thing when it's not you. It's a whole different thing when the rabbit has the gun. So what I think, you know, just because you put something in, and just because I think it's a clever thing, doesn't make it be clever. It's just that I think it, or I might be running for re-election, and I have to explain to people why I voted for eminent domain, and therefore I want to put something out here and make it about me. I was here before the alderman from the 22nd was here. In fact, if we want to get into it, I can produce all his literature about what he said when he ran. I still have it on my computer versus what he's doing down here, okay? Now, I don't want to get into that, so I would ask him not to make me.
Alderman, if you want to state a point of order, please rise and come to the mic and state your point of order.
Mr. President, this is a very emotional issue that we're dealing with here today. It's very hard for a number of people, but to go ahead and start ranting about one of our colleagues down here about an election and campaign issues is completely off topic.
Point of order, well taken. Alderwoman from the 1st, his election, past elections are not being debated on the floor today. Let me finish. What is being debated today is the points within this bill. There wasn't any prior reference to his campaign by him or anything, so please keep your points relevant to what's before us today.
Thank you, Mr. President. I surely will, but I will reference that he indicated that somehow that this was a great amendment. It is not, and he indicated something different than what you all told me that the amendment was in committee. Now, I don't know if we have a point in which we can bring a resolution straight to committee without bringing it on the floor, okay? I haven't ever experienced that either. Maybe that's something new that you all changed while I was taking my vacation. But normally, when we do a resolution, we bring it to the full floor. Somebody has to sponsor it. Who's going to sponsor it, okay? Then it has to go to HUD's. Then it would have to come back out here. So
that's the exact process.
Oh, so what he said was incorrect. All right, that's what I want people to know. That is not the correct way that it was told to me. All right, and so the other thing is then who's going to do it? Okay, so we did this. So the alderwoman from the 5th, is she going to do it? Is anybody going to do it? Who's going to sponsor this?
If nobody sponsors it, nobody can take up eminent domain.
Okay, but who's going to sponsor this? We didn't. There are some things that we didn't cover because this was a last-minute thing that was done in committee. And just for a point of order, and I don't know if I can ask this now, it was put on my desk, 263 floor substitute. Are we bringing this up? Is this going to be before us? I don't know. Does other people have this on their desk? And is this something we're bringing?
That is the bill.
The floor substitute that he just put here? This is a different, this is the bill we're dealing with.
That's the bill we're dealing with.
Okay. Thank you very much. So it's not that I'm not saying that you were not trying to add something. I'm saying that it was missing something, and at the end of the day, it is still eminent domain, okay? And that is what I am opposed to. So if you are eminent domain me by one parcel at a time, and then you come into Ms. Taylor's house and Ms. Jones' house, and we're saying we need these 3,000 jobs, we're going to do it. Now, are we going to do it if we don't have it, but we have another development? Yes, we're going to do it. We're going to say, but we got this other development, because hope lives eternal. And so we're doing development based on hope versus doing development based on what we actually have, okay? And so we don't feel good when we do eminent domain and we don't have something we can tell the people, because people are pretty much opposed to it. I mean, so we have to have something that we can say it's all right to vote for this. So if we say we got this added level of protection, but it's a protection with eminent domain. So it may be an added level of protection to you, but to me, it is still not removing eminent domain from it, or even putting a sunset clause on it, so that if that's what we're doing. And that is I'm going to remain opposed to it. I don't think it was a very well worked together, thought out plan, and I know it wasn't, because I know we didn't have any time except for when you came in. And so I don't speak to what I thought. I'm speaking to what I was actually in the committee and what was going on.
Alderman from the 21st.
Thank you, Mr. President. I really want to thank the alderman from the 11th and the alderman from the 24th for their exchange earlier, because it brought out information that I really was not conscious of. For some reason, I was not thinking that the TIF sucked up half of this earnings tax money. Now, when you include that, that actually takes in, that changes the whole calculation here. So currently, right now, that area generates earnings tax, property tax, and sales tax. There are people that live there who pay property taxes. They work. They pay earnings taxes. There are businesses there with employees that pay both earnings tax and sales tax on their sales. And so that area generates a certain amount of tax revenue right now. Now, if the NGA was to relocate there, being a government entity, a federal government entity, they would not pay any property tax whatsoever. They would not pay any sales tax whatsoever. In fact, the only tax revenue we would get would be earnings tax on their employees. And now to learn that actually half of that would go to the city and half of that would go to Mr. McKee and his project is disturbing. Now, I didn't think it was true. I see some shaking heads now. So I confirmed this with Otis over there, Otis Williams, and he confirms that half the earnings tax will go to this TIF. Now, that, to me, is very disturbing. And this all could really be worked out in a simple spreadsheet that would show how much sales tax and property tax, along with earnings tax, is generated currently from that area, and then compare that to the potential earning tax revenue minus 50% that would then come to the city. And so even just as a economic deal, this is much less appealing now. And that's information that frankly should have come out when we were considering this in committee. And frankly, it should be attached in the form of some fiscal note to this bill, which it is not. We do not have fiscal notes on bills. That's one of the most irresponsible things I think we do down here. But there should be a fiscal note to show exactly what the impact would be. And we're being told and beat upon the head and Post-Dispatch editorials and comments from people from Room 200 that this is all about the money and how can we sit back and possibly vote against a deal that will cause us to lose almost $3 million or $2.5 million in earnings tax, and they never mention that we don't get half of that. Now, that's just wrong. And it shows that we're not doing due diligence down here and just crunching the numbers. So what is it that we're actually getting in earnings tax? What is the difference between the current revenue we generate from that area, from the existing homeowners, property owners, workers, businesses, and then what's the difference? And if it comes out that it's a difference of $200,000 or $300,000, and that's what we threw out people's property rights for, And that's when we gambled with using eminent domain to take their homes and flatten an entire area and risk the possibility of being like many municipalities in the St. Louis area that have exercised eminent domain only to have the project never realized. Then that's something we should know, and we should make informed decisions. To me, that just makes no sense. And then it also clicks as, oh, I see why Paul McKee wants to get this thing there. I see why the mayor's office, of all the vacant land in the city of St. Louis, chooses that area. Because Mr. McKee has been unable to get any significant development in that area since we passed that TIF deal, has been unable to generate any TIF revenue for his project, and by locating NGA in the middle of his site, it gives him at least $1 million a year in TIF. Now, that's something we should have talked about in committee. And that's something we should know and discuss and see a spreadsheet on to really see what this deal is valued at. Because just with that information that came out from the discussion between the aldermen from the 24th and the 11th, that's 50% less than I thought we were talking about before. So these are decisions we need to make. And so, again, fiscal notes on bills, I think, are good things. And in light of all the things we've seen in St. Louis City and St. Louis region in the last few months, on bills like this, and for lack of a better term, there should be a racial note too. We should talk about the racial impact of things like this. The city of St. Louis has a long history of doing these kind of things. Many of the areas we drive into now, many people would be shocked to learn that African Americans used to live there. There used to be black neighborhoods there. And we do this all the time in the city of St. Louis, where we flatten African American neighborhoods, relocate people in the name of a better development. To benefit who? It doesn't benefit those people that live there. Those people are gone. You kick them out. And in light of all that's occurred, that this board, within months of nationally televised riots and actions and violence in our streets all around race, will entertain the idea of using eminent domain against an African American neighborhood, would fight any efforts to add real power to a community, to a citizen oversight board, would actually entertain bills that would make it harder for black contractors to get jobs in the city of St. Louis. You would think we're doing this in a vacuum, like we don't know what just happened in this city, and like we haven't learned anything. And that's disappointing. So I would really like to see that spreadsheet before anybody voted on this. I'd like to know exactly what we're talking about in dollars and cents as far as how much of this, the only tax revenue we would generate from this project, which would be earnings tax, how much of that we get, how much of that Mr. McKee gets for his project, and then how that compares to the existing tax revenue generated from that area now. I would ask if the alderman from the 5th would yield to a question.
Alderman from the 5th, will you yield for questioning to the alderman from the 21st?
Yes.
Alderman from the 21st, please proceed.
Thank you, Alderman from the 5th. Are you familiar with Trojan Iron Works owned by the Lowry family?
No.
Okay, they're in that area. They've been there since 1984. Their business is located at the corner of Warren and 25th Streets. They have employees. They've been there for over 30 years. They pay property tax. They pay sales tax. They pay earnings tax. Are you familiar with Home Improvement Outlet?
I don't know of those businesses personally, but it was just relayed to me that SLDC has spoken with some of those entities, and they've been willing to communicate back and forth.
Okay. My question, though, are you familiar with Home Improvement Outlet? They're located at 1526 North Jefferson. They've been there for 20 years. Teresa Goodwin, she works there. They pay earnings tax, property tax, and sales tax. Are you familiar with Sponge Producers Company?
I know this is your media show, but it's not going to happen. What I can say about the earnings tax is that if we lose this, we won't get anything. So while you're discussing a board-approved TIF that happened, that was in the works before I ever got down here, let's not muddy this water anymore. You know.
Are you familiar with Faultless Medical?
I'm no longer yielding the questions.
Okay. That's unfortunate. Well, let me mention a few of these businesses so you might become aware of them in your ward. Sponge Producers Company, been located at 2141 Cass Avenue for 18 years. They pay property tax, earnings tax, and sales tax. Faultless Medical Healthcare Laundry operates a large and fairly new facility at 1615 North 25th. They've been there for 2.5 years, just located in your neighborhood. These are businesses that have been there for a long time and have stuck it out, and they pay taxes now. And in fact, I don't know, but I would like to know, between all of those businesses together and the property owners, and even those folks that own derelict buildings and vacant buildings on there pay some degree of property tax on it, what that area generates in tax right now, and then how that compares to the 50% of the tax that we're talking about collecting if we relocate this. So I'll ask the Alderman from the 5th again if she would yield. Do you know how much taxes are currently generated in that area? Okay. All right. Well, that's disappointing because the Alderman from the 5th has appealed to us several times on the basis of aldermanic courtesy, but does not have the courtesy even to answer a question. I can only imagine how she treats the folks who live in her community. I don't think any of these questions are improper.
Alderman from 21st, hold. We really need to maintain some decorum here, so please hold your applause and everything. I know it's an emotional issue. Alderman, please proceed. Alderman from 21st.
Yeah.
Alderman from 28th, please state your point of order.
Thank you. I would appreciate it if the Alderman from the 21st wouldn't make personal comments about how he might think another Alderman treats their constituents. I don't think that's the appropriate way to conduct ourselves here. So
Alderman from the 28th, point of order well taken. Alderman from the 21st, please keep your comments.
I appreciate the Alderman from the 28th comment. And I'll apologize for that last statement, but I don't apologize that the Alderwoman from the 5th has on several occasions here, in fact, over the course of this entire bill, appealed to aldermanic courtesy, and I find it very discourteous not to even answer simple questions, not personal questions, simple questions about the tax revenue currently generated in that area. I think that's an appropriate question. It's information we should all have. And at the end of the day, if the folks who are supporting this bill and pushing this thing are saying we should do that in order to retain sales tax or earnings tax, and doing that in order to retain a certain measure of revenue, we should know what we're comparing that against. What are we giving up? What are the revenues currently being paid by the folks that we are threatening to move out of that community, including longstanding businesses, not just property owners? And we should have that information. And I don't think it's unreasonable to ask. And in fact, I think if we don't have that information, we're making an uninformed decision.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman from 22nd.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. As I stated earlier, I'm always interested and intrigued with public discourse. And in the process of public discourse, I think it's appropriate that we're respectful to one another. Now, the Alderman from the 1st made a comment that suggested that my mother was not independent. See, that's personal to me. But what she said was, it seems like he may be able to speak for his mother, but I can't because my mother is independent, which suggests that my mother is not independent. Well, I'm disappointed that she would suggest that because she knows my mother, okay? And she's entitled to her opinion, but I would like to suggest that my mother raised a proud, independent black man. And what I said before I prefaced it about speaking on behalf of my mother was that we talk on a regular basis because I love and I respect my mother, and she made me the person I am today. And with that, I'd like to call the question, Mr. President.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 22nd that we call the question. Entertain a second on that motion. Seconded by the Alderwoman from the 13th. It's been moved by the Alderman from 22nd, seconded by the Alderman from 13th, that we call the question. If the motion passes, we will go directly to a vote on the board bill, the third reading of board bill number 263 for substitute. So a vote in affirmative would uphold the call of the question and take us directly to a vote on the board bill and suspend any further discussion. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus.
No.
Alderwoman Flowers. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderman Conway. Alderman Ortman. Alderman Vollmer. Alderman Villa.
No.
Alderman Arnowitz. Alderwoman Murphy. Alderwoman Howard. Alderwoman Green. Alderwoman Behringer. Alderman Rhodey. Alderman Kennedy. Alderwoman Davis. Alderman Schmid. Alderman French. Alderman Boyd. Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Ogilvie. Alderman Cone. Alderman Williamson. Alderman Carter. Alderwoman Cruzen. President Reed.
No.
Alderwoman Flowers. Alderman Cone. Twelve aye votes, 16 no votes.
By your vote, you failed. Again, I'm going to ask everybody in the galleries and the chambers to please refrain from applause. By your vote, you failed to sustain the motion of the Alderman from the 22nd. Alderman from the 1st, you're recognized.
Mr. President, members of the board, so I have met the Alderman from the 22nd Ward mother many times. There was no disparagement meant by me saying that my mother is independent. It's like when I say I'm black and I'm proud. That doesn't mean that you're not white and you're proud, okay? So he took that as something that it didn't mean. So I want to address
Alderman from the 28th, please state your point of order.
I think that we are here to discuss anybody's mother, and I don't think that is on point to this bill, and we've been doing it for a long time this morning. I just don't think it's on point to the bill. Thank you.
Alderwoman from the 1st, I know you were responding to the Alderman from the 22nd.
I'm just finished with it.
Okay, please.
I'm finished. That was my thing is that I didn't mean that. I was just saying that my mother, you better not speak for her, and I'm not speaking to it, so I'm done with it, okay? So going on with what I have to say, because I was finished with it.
Alderman 28th, you have another point of order.
I mean, I stated a point of order. I think you sustained that point of order, but the conversation continued.
No, it did not.
She's moving on. She was stating that she's moving on past it.
Point of order, I was just saying I was done. There was anything to say. I was not continuing with it.
For both you guys, please just continue with the rest of your discussion.
I have gotten counsel from the fellow alderman from the 11th, who is one of my senior alderman people, who was here when I got here, unlike many of the people who want to try to close off debate. And he has counseled me that just ignore the remarks and to go on, and I have a lot of respect. Sometimes when you come back later in life, you learn to respect people who've been here and who've gone through the things, so I have a lot of respect. So I was planning on just saying that I was not going any further with that, and that I think that we have said everything that needs to be said about this bill, except for that I'm glad to hear that the Alderman from the 21st learned some things about TIF. That is something that we all need to study more closely. The whole thing about the taxes, moving a company from one spot to another, and government don't pay any taxes. Now we're going to have 2 sites. Because what are we going to do? I guess I don't know. What are we going to do with the property that's down there? Will the government then hold that like they did with Pruitt-Igoe? So now we got 2 sites where there's absolutely no taxes. When we talk about the TIF, when we talk about financial matters, we never down here seem to get any kind of written information about finances. We always hear this, well, this is what's going to happen. I want to thank the alderman from the 11th for talking about when he was state rep that they would get information about how it would be a financial impact. I would agree with Alderman from the 21st. We need to show what financial impact is. I don't think that I always vote against TIFs because I've been for a long time against them, because the school board was always against them because it takes money. But to put it in context and talk about moving 3,000 jobs, we keep the 3,000 jobs, we keep the earning tax, but we lose any property tax on all of this land. We don't know what happens to the other land. I know that the land that they have right now can't probably be half of what we're giving them. I don't understand the need for all of this security when we don't even have that much for the President of the United States, okay? So I think that's an exaggerated amount of land. I still don't understand why all of a sudden Pruitt-Igoe has been taken out of the deal. I think that is another red herring, and I think that doing this bill within less than a month to hurry it on down and hurry up is a way to scare people and to say we have to do it. And this is why we have to do it, and that we didn't want it to be examined, and we don't want people to have information, and we don't want them to, we just want people to trust our words. It's what I heard from the people with the LCRA and SLDC, no, not SLDC, LCRA and CDA, trust us, trust us. I trust you if you trust me enough to give me documents to read, if you can give me answers, if you give me enough time where I can look at something and not make this an emergency. We passed a resolution about this about the government June of 2014. So this is February 2015. We've had all this time to be giving us documents about this is what we want to do. We know who the members of the HUD committee are. We promise things that still don't ever show up. Well, I'm going to send you a digital information about this, still don't have it, okay? So it's very hard to trust you when you promise me things and then you don't provide the information. It's like you don't trust what I'm going to read because maybe it doesn't say what you say it says.
All right, thank you. Alderman from the 17th.
Yes, Mr. President, I am kind of hesitant to even talk today because of our such a long meeting, but I do feel like I would like to add some insight into some of the comments that were made, and I believe I have a pretty good grasp of what I think the city's goal and strategy is in all this, and I thought it would be appropriate. This is a very difficult issue anytime you start talking about people's homes, but we are, whether we like to admit it or not, in a fairly desperate situation as a city. Before I get into that, I would like to address the issue of the 50% of the earnings tax that was brought up earlier. We had heard earlier in the debate how so much of this part of town had been neglected. Some people allege willfully neglected, which I take exception to. But the reality is that what the TIF will do is 50% of that tax revenue that won't come back to the city but will stay in the TIF district, that will actually improve the infrastructure of the surrounding neighborhood. And all that stuff's in the TIF bill. Now, the comments that were made today by the alderman from the 21st Ward about us having a spreadsheet, I think that's a valid comment, and we should have that information. I think it would have been much more appropriate to have that comment and request at the committee level where we could have dealt with it in a timely way and we could have gotten that information out. We are here on the 12th hour and we are on a very, very difficult deadline to get these things done so that we can go ahead and get our application in. If we do not take action today, we risk we're always at the risk of losing the jobs, but we will make it a certainty that we will lose those jobs. I I think this is difficult, and I want to commend the sponsors of this because it's politically challenging and difficult. And this is not the type of thing where you wake up in the morning and say, yippee, I get to go out and sponsor eminent domain legislation. But I too, kind of like numbers, like the older woman from the first, and I've done quite a bit of research over the last few months on what's going on with the city. And anybody who doesn't think that we're dancing blindfold on an edge of an abyss, they're delusional. I mean, we have, the numbers speak for themselves. The older woman from the 5th talked about it earlier. The thousands of vacant lots that we have, the unemployment rate, the poverty rate, the fact that our median income is way below the median income of the rest of the region. The statistics are mind-boggling. And to understand how it's very easy to come down here and say, oh, we should do this or we should do that, but it's very important for us to understand how all this stuff works. Municipalities have strategies on how they pay their bills. And we can go ahead and let's take a look at a couple of those strategies. The city of Ladue, they are so concerned about the poor of the region, and I don't want to pick on the people of Ladue. I have friends that live out there. But the reality is that the city of Ladue was developed in a way that if you want to live there, you have to live on an acre lot. And because it's fairly expensive to live on an acre lot, there aren't many poor people in Ladue. And in fact, I don't think Ladue has a homeless problem. They take care of their own, and they're not particularly worried about what happens to the residents of the city. That's not saying they're bad people. I'd like to live in Ladue. It would be nice to live in Ladue. It's not my taste, but still, I understand the allure for some people to live there. There's Richmond Heights. Richmond Heights' strategy for paying their bill is that they have the Galleria Mall. They have a shopping center on Clayton. They got the movie theaters out there, and they keep all that sales tax. And that's how they pay for the services for their residents. And of course, we've heard in the news so vividly on the front pages every day, how are they paying the bills for the municipalities in near North St. Louis? Through traffic tickets. 30% of their revenue is through traffic tickets. So here we are in the city of St. Louis. And we have a disproportionate share of the region's poor, a disproportionate share of the unemployed, a disproportionate share of the educated. And I'm a Democrat. My dad, people were talking about Pruitt-Igoe. My dad was down here when I was a kid, and he sat on the commission that looked into Pruitt-Igoe. He, with A.J. Cervantes, who was mayor at the time, sat in on the rent strikes, and he met with the residents. As a kid, when I traveled with my parents on vacation, our big tourist stops were public housing in other cities to see how they worked. My dad voted for equal accommodations. He voted for fair employment back in the 50s and the 60s. My family lived this. That was what we talked about at dinner. And to come down and act like somehow or another we're indifferent about all this stuff, we take this stuff very seriously. And I'm indignant at the thought that somehow or another we're callous and uncaring. The strategy for St. Louis, whether we like it or not, is one that we have to live with. And the strategy is that we have businesses in the city, we tax them, and we take that money from those businesses and we pay services with them. And that's how we pay for our fire department. That's how we go ahead and we pay for our parks department. That's how we pay for educating the children in our city. The amount of that transfer of wealth from those businesses and those people working in the city is overwhelming. Businesses represent less than a third of the geographic area, but every source of tax revenue that you can track, they are paying well over half of it. They're paying over half the real estate taxes. They're paying over half of the gas taxes, natural gas, the utility taxes, real estate taxes, the electric taxes. We can't figure out what's going on with the phone taxes that are paid. If you call earnings taxes a business tax, they're paying $150 million on that. It's just that is how it works. That is taxing those businesses is how we take care of the poor and the needy of our city. And that's a moral responsibility I, as a Democrat and one who was raised, feel very, very strongly about. And I don't take that seriously. I take it very seriously when we have to balance the interests of those who are the recipients of our public taxes, the people who are using those services who can't afford to pay for them on their own, and how do we balance that? And it's something that we all struggle with, and we obviously come up with different conclusions on what the right way to do that is. But to go ahead and act like somehow or another we're insensitive about it is just, it's just not right. Now, you go in and you actually take a look, and back when Mayor Bosley was mayor, there was a group that was called the Inner City Competitiveness Project or something. Oh, here it is. The Initiative for a Competitive Inner City. And they conducted a study on how we can go ahead and pay for our services for the residents in our city. And they conducted this back in 2000. And they went out and they said, why are jobs leaving the city? Because every job that left the city, this is back in 1999, they estimated each job that left the city cost the city $2,500. That's $2,500. The number one reason businesses were leaving the city, they went back and they interviewed people who left the city. They found 15 of them. The reason for 11 of them was site assemblage. They wanted to expand and employ more people and pay more taxes in the city, but they could not find a place that would fit them. And so therefore, site assemblage was the number one cause for them leaving. Now, we're down here and we have to allocate very, very scarce resources. Our strategy as these businesses have left the city, and I'm like, almost, if you don't understand the direness of our circumstances, I'm almost embarrassed to bring this up, and I don't know if this is even good public policy to discuss this stuff because it undermines confidence in the city. But I got elected in 1988. To put it in perspective, we have $1 billion budget down here. About half of that we collect in taxes. So we collect about $500 million in taxes to support our city, and then we charge fees of another $500 million. Of course, those fees are constantly going up. Our water bills are going up. Our trash collection is going up. Why? Because we don't have the businesses paying the taxes in the city. But since I've been down here in 1988, there have been 19 ballot measures on the ballot to increase the taxes for us in the city. Of the $500 million, take a piece of paper and write this down. Of our $500 million of taxes that were collected, 19 ballot measures raised $204 million. So we have increased our rate of taxation 19 times, and now it accounts for 40% of the taxes we collect, and that's because our tax base is getting smaller. So what we're doing is we're increasing our tax rates to make up the shrinkage of our tax base. And we've done it 19 times in the last 27 years, every other year. So what we do is when we run out of money, we go ahead and we throw something on the ballot that says, let's raise the taxes. So we raise the taxes, and then we run off more people because the taxes are so high, they start leaving. And the quality of our services continue to decline. It is a very, very difficult situation to be in. And it's something that I don't relish. I'm hesitant to even talk about this publicly because it begins undermining our whole process. And of course, we had a solution just a couple of weeks ago to yet raise taxes again to put on a bond issue. Now, I have been through very controversial pieces of legislation in my own right, and I'm supporting this because I'd be hypocritical if I did not. But these pieces of legislation are difficult, challenging, and they keep you up at night. And the thought that you're going to go ahead and do this stuff without it bothering you, or that you do it, like it's you wake up in the morning and you feel good about it, that's just crazy. Let me just walk through a couple of pieces of difficult legislation. This is why I think the aldermen from the 3rd and the 5th ought to be commended, because what they're doing is difficult. I have lived through it. We blighted, with eminent domain, 6 blocks in Botanical Heights. Last year, I called up the building division, the 17th Ward. Out of all the construction in the city, 50% of the building permits were issued in the 17th Ward. Everybody tells me how wonderful Botanical Heights is. Well, it's wonderful over there, and they're doing infill housing, and we're saving historic structures, but none of that would have been possible if we hadn't passed the legislation that transformed that, re-imaged it, and gave people some belief that things could get better. And as a result of the 150 new homes that were built on those 6 blocks, the whole area over there is now blossoming. I had people, and that wouldn't have happened if I wouldn't have had the support of the other members of the Board of Aldermen down here. I handled a controversial piece of legislation for BJC when they wanted to go ahead and expand into the park. I had people out with recall petitions going through my ward. Today, if that hadn't happened, today, BJC is in the midst of a $1.6 billion construction project. And elected officials in our city are negotiating with them, and have been negotiating with them, about workforce readiness and employing residents of our city, hundreds of residents of our city, on construction sites. None of that would have happened if we wouldn't have done the Hudlin lease. For 25 years, I've been working on Cortex. About 10 years ago, we passed 180 acres. The alderwoman from the 1st says, well, why don't they go ahead and do eminent domain over in the, somewhere off of Lindell? Well, Cortex is about 2 blocks off of Lindell, and it's not 100 acres, it's 180 acres. People talk to me all the time, and they tell me, Joe, Cortex, it's unbelievable what's happening over there. All that construction activity, the new jobs, the energy, that is so exciting. It's a 25-year effort. I went out and I raised venture capital money, I raised site acquisition money, and I think by most people's standards, they would call that a great success. Matter of fact, I think it's probably the #1 economic initiative of the city, and I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't one of the top economic initiatives in the entire state of Missouri. But after 25 years, we are starting to build momentum. There are fewer than 3,000 jobs in all of Cortex. 1,500 of them or so are probably transplanted from other parts in St. Louis, and about 1,500 of them are net new jobs. So our most successful economic initiative over the last 25 years has netted us about 1,500 jobs, half the number of jobs that we would be losing if, in fact, we lose this. As a result of Cortex, a coalition of civil rights leaders met with area contractors, and the hundreds of millions of dollars that are going on in construction now in Cortex, it is the basis of that construction that has become the genesis of our workforce activity that many of the people down here have been involved in. And now those jobs are available to city residents who can then in turn go home, pay taxes, buy homes, and send their children to school. This is a very complicated and it's an emotional thing. I can't expect that somebody being down here is not upset. But we are in a very, very challenging time. We are dancing blindfolded on an edge of an abyss. I just want to make one more last comment, and that is, the cost of running a city is just, it's hard, it's confusing, trying to get to the bottom of it all. There's 100 acres out there. We talked about the revenue that's coming in, but we really didn't think about what the expenses are going out. That's 100 acres that's going to go that'll be 100 acres we don't have to build roads for. It'll be 100 acres that won't be sending kids to our schools. It'll be 100 acres that we won't have to be cutting grasses on. It'll be 100 acres that we won't have to police if this comes to pass. Going ahead and providing city services, and this is a bit of an exaggeration, I'm not trying to demean anybody, so please don't take this the wrong way, but we have one homeowner per 2 acres. It is so extraordinarily expensive for us to go ahead and provide services when we have people living at one homeowner per 2 acres. And I know that there's some businesses in there, and that's not a terribly accurate number, but that is just overwhelming when you go ahead and do that. What's happening in Detroit? They danced blindfolded next to the abyss, and they fell in. They're selling their art museum collection. They're going up there, and in neighborhoods that are underpopulated, they're basically cordoning them off and not providing any city services to them at all. So we're down here, we don't know how close the abyss is, how close we are, we're all dancing around blindfolded, but I don't think we're more than an economic downturn or two, or a few thousand more employees before we're down here and we're laying off people, dozens and dozens and hundreds of people. And I just, I empathize with everyone's here, but it's a difficult situation. And I think that the solution that the alderwoman from the 5th and the 3rd, I think they're compassionate people, and I think they're committed people, and I think that the folks over at SLDC really want to make this thing a win-win situation for everyone involved, and I think they'll work very, very hard to try to make that happen. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? Alderman from 20th.
Mr. President, members of the board, I wasn't going to say anything, but I think the alderman from the 17th did make some very compelling arguments. He's almost got me into a position of revisiting my vote, but I want to kind of briefly explain that as I see this process, basically we had a developer who got a lot of benefits, and the city is supposed to see a lot of those benefits as well. And there were promises made of no eminent domain as part of that process. NGA, which is a very important employer and provides some great stability in the 9th Ward and also in the 20th Ward, because I have residents who are employees down there at Geospatial, is an important employer to keep. However, we don't have any assurance that once we take these houses that in fact they're going to go in and around the Pruitt-Igoe site. So as I mentioned earlier, and we got a letter in our boxes from the federal government representative who basically is indicating that they're not going to engage in eminent domain. Essentially, we're going to be the ones that have to do that in order for us to satisfy what it is that they're looking for. But there are other options here, and we discussed those last time, and I think the alderwoman from the 1st Ward added another one to that possibly. The one is an option contract with provisions that if this site is not selected, that in fact the people will remain in their homes, or some sort of contract for deed so that if we don't get the NGA, people will remain in their homes. Because after all, the only reason we're doing this is for the public good. We're looking at the individual homeowners and their good, which is part of the public. We're also looking for the public good in terms of the jobs and what we're doing in terms of retaining a very important employer and another governmental entity, and something that's really good for our city. But if they don't stay there, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to level this and have even fewer people living on 2 acres of land. So the only response that I have to what the alderman from the 17th said, and he made some very powerful arguments, and they are well reasoned, and there's great background for those. The only difference that I really see is that on the 6 blocks of Botanical Heights, and I think that was pretty controversial because of some of the historic homes as well, was that we had a sense that we knew what we were going to get. We knew that there was a developer. They presented what their plans were. This is what was going to be developed there. And even with that, it was very traumatic for people to lose their buildings. And I will tell you that it's had an impact on other neighborhoods from people who have had to look for other housing and where they have opportunities to do that. Many of the people from McCreetown came into other neighborhoods and weren't able perhaps to do as well as they might have had they been able to stay where they grew up and in McCreetown. And in addition to that, with BJC and Cortex as well, we had someone there who had a track record, an excellent track record, BJC. We knew basically what we were going to get. We've actually gotten more perhaps than we expected to get. We had an idea, yes, no one knew perhaps that Cortex would be as wildly successful as it has been, but we knew how we wanted to position ourselves within the city for this scientific effort, and we had some idea of what we were going to get, and we weren't just demolishing buildings for the if come. So that's the only difference. And so I just wanted to explain why it is that I still have a concern about not selecting one of these better options before we go ahead and use eminent domain in this kind of situation. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion?
He just said.
Alderwoman from the 5th, you're recognized to close.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to renew my motion.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 5th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 3rd. We third reading and finally passed Board Bill number 263. Floor substitute. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Flowers. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Hubbard.
Aye.
Alderwoman Ingracia.
Aye.
Alderman Conway.
Aye.
Alderman Ortman.
Aye.
Alderman Vollmer.
Aye.
Alderman Villa.
No.
Alderman Arnowitz.
Aye.
Alderwoman Murphy. Alderwoman Howard.
Aye.
Alderwoman Green.
No.
Alderwoman Behringer.
Aye.
Alderman Rhodey.
Aye.
Alderman Kennedy. Alderwoman Davis. Alderman Schmidt. Alderman French. Alderman Boyd. Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Ogilvie. Alderman Cone. Alderman Williamson. Alderman Carter. Alderwoman Cruzen. President Reed.
No.
Alderman Cone.
No.
17 aye votes, 11 no votes.
By your vote, you sustain the motion. Alderwoman from the 5th and 3rd read and finally passed Board Bill number 263, floor substitute.
Board Bill 189, committee substitute, sponsored by Aldermen and Alderwomen. Boyd, President Reed, Tyus, Flowers, Bosley, Moore, Hubbard, Ingracia, Conway, Ortman, Vollmer, Villa, Arnowitz, Murphy, Howard, Green, Behringer, Rhodey, Kennedy, Davis, Schmid, French, Vaccaro, Ogilvie, Cone, Williamson, Carter, and Cruzen. An ordinance recommended by the Civil Service Commission pertaining to applicants seeking employment with the city in positions under the Classified Service Plan, finding that services in the U.S. Armed Forces is meritorious, adding new provisions that establish a military veteran hiring preference system containing definitions, scoring system, and documentation requirements. Alderman from the 22nd, you recognize on third reading, final passage of Board Bill number 189, committee substitute.
Mr. President, members of the board, I move for third reading, final passage of Board Bill 189, committee substitute.
Moved by the Alderman from the 22nd, seconded by the Alderman from the 10th. Alderman, please proceed.
Mr. President, well, first I want to correct some of the reading that the clerk made. The board bill was not recommended by the Civil Service Commission. The board bill is actually recommended by the citizens of the city of St. Louis by a charter amendment that was approved back in November. I think we may have some old language. But anyway, I like to suggest and say that today is a great day for veterans in the city of St. Louis. I'm reminded of when I got off active duty and I came back to the city of St. Louis and how I struggled to get meaningful employment. I found myself working a job just a step above minimum wage and a Domino's pizza driver actually in the afternoons just to make sure that all my needs were met. And so putting it before the people and the people giving us an opportunity to create this ordinance is a powerful statement that the citizens of St. Louis are saying that we will have a policy that supports our veterans for the hard work and sacrifices that they have made to our country. And for that, again, I greatly appreciate the citizens of the city of St. Louis, all my colleagues that are co-sponsoring this bill. And the bill basically gives 5 additional bonus points to any service member who successfully passes a civil service examination for initial employment. If the veteran is disabled, it gives 10 points. Now, this is just like the state of Missouri, St. Louis County, a lot of municipalities across the whole country, even the post office. It's just that the city of St. Louis is a little bit behind, but I'm glad we're playing catch up now to actually enact such legislation as this. But it also goes a small step forward that any veterans that's within the system of the city of St. Louis, it will give 1 additional promotion point if they successfully pass the civil service examination.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Further discussion. Alderman from the 22nd, you recognize close.
I renew my motion.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 22nd, seconded by the Alderman from the 10th, that we third read and finally pass Board Bill number 189, committee substitute. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyers. Alderwoman Flowers. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderman Conway. Alderman Ortman. Alderman Vollmer. Alderman Villa. Alderman Arnowitz. Alderwoman Murphy. Alderwoman Howard. Alderwoman Green. Alderwoman Behringer. Alderman Rhodey. Alderman Kennedy. Alderwoman Davis. Alderman Schmid. Alderman French. Alderman Boyd. Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Ogilvie. Alderman Cone. Alderman Williamson. Alderman Carter. Alderwoman Cruzen. President Reed.
Aye.
Alderman Moore. Alderman Kennedy. 26 aye votes.
By your vote, you sustain the motion. Alderman from the 22nd. And third read and finally passed Board Bill number 189, committee substitute.
That's the extent of third reading report of engrossment.
Report of enrollment.
Board Bills 250, 264, 210, 211, 240, 248, 212, 213, 223, 224, 234, 236, 237, 239, 243, 253, 254, 255, 257, 258, 261, 262, 244, 259, 263, floor substitute, 189, committee substitute, 268, 235, 242, 260, 269, 270, 271, 238, committee substitute, and 232.
All other business being suspended, the President shall in open session affix his signature hereto to the end that these may become law. move for adoption of courtesy resolution calendar. Entertain a second on the motion, seconded by the Alderman from the 20th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Dispense with line item 21 and 22, miscellaneous unfinished business.
We have none.
Announcements.
Monday, February the 16th, office is closed for President's Day. The rest of the week, we have no meetings. That's the extent of my announcements.
Any further announcements? Any further announcements? Any further announcements? Alderman from the 18th, you recognize on the motion to excuse.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the board, it's my understanding that all aldermen were present.
All right, excellent, Alderman. Alderman, you're recognized on the motion to adjourn.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the board, I move that the Board of Aldermen adjourns until Monday, April 20th, 2015, sine die.
Moved by the Alderman from the 18th, seconded by the Alderman from the 25th. And all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Stand adjourned.